Chapter 994. Although it was the Crow class with many problematic children, the treatment of the students of the Crow class was no different from that of the Mole class. In terms of dormitories, the scale of both classes was almost the same. However, Noah had once wondered if the dormitory of the Elven Academy was a little too luxurious in terms of dormitories. Because from the outside, it didn't look like a dormitory at all, but more like a luxurious mansion. Now, Noah had arrived in front of the luxurious dormitory of the Crow class. In other words, in the end, Noah decided to stay in the Crow class dormitory for the time being. However, the room that Noah planned to stay in wasn't the room that Claire and Viviana were in. Humph, Linley proudly raised her head and puffed out her chest, looking like a winner. Sure enough, in the end, it's still my overwhelming victory. Ugh. Viviana, who was acting like everything was under her control, pouted her lips unwillingly and looked at Noah with hidden bitterness. Why don't you stay with me? Don't tell me you hate the licentious princess. Although I've never thought of living with you, losing to Lynn Silei is still something I can't accept. Claire also seemed to be unable to let it go, especially when she saw Linley's triumphant look. She gnashed her teeth and glared at Noah. Why did you choose Linley? Which part of me can't compare to this woman? Hearing Claire's words, Noah was speechless. Although strictly speaking, this sentence could not be said to be wrong. But if it was heard by someone who didn't know, they would definitely think of Pian Pian. On the contrary, Linley brushed her waist-length golden hair and said calmly, You're asking the obvious. Claire Lucio, of course it's because I'm better than you in every aspect. That's why Noah chose me. No, you're mistaken. Noah couldn't help but correct her. I just think that living with you is the least tiring way for me. Noah didn't know why Viviana was so enthusiastic about him. And whether Viviana was serious or just playing around, Noah also didn't know. However, Noah didn't know much about Viviana, but Noah already had a certain degree of understanding about Claire. To put it simply, this girl was more innocent than Alice, and more violent than Alice. If he stayed in Claire's room, even if he didn't consider Princess Vienna, Noah could predict that under Claire's sensitive and pure character, he would definitely suffer much more torment and noise than when he stayed in Alice's room. On the contrary, Linley didn't show any excessive reaction to Noah from the beginning. This might be because of her pride, but at least, this precondition, there wouldn't be any commotion. This was Noah's consideration. Besides, isn't she the only one living in Linley's room? Noah shrugged. Then, it's normal for me to stay in Linley's room, right? There were two things that were wrong here. First, it wasn't normal for a man to live in a woman's dormitory. Second, Linley wasn't the only one living in her room. Carol was also in her room. However, Noah only recently found out that Carol wasn't actually Linley's roommate, but was treated as Linley's personal belonging and arranged to stay in Linley's room. Similar situations weren't uncommon. Like the contracted spirits of elven users, some elven users would let them live with them instead of letting them return to the elemental world. For this reason, the Elven Academy had a rule that students stayed in a room in pairs, and contracted spirits were counted as the students' personal belongings and weren't counted. Carol was such an existence. Therefore, although Carol was still living in Linley's room was only filled with her name in the Academy's dormitory records. This was also one of the reasons why Noah chose Linley's room. First, make it clear. Alice, who had followed along, warned Noah solemnly, her eyes filled with unprecedented seriousness. If I receive a report that you've done something dirty, I'll definitely make you into a grilled mackerel. The dishes have become more and more varied recently, congratulations. What did you say? Nothing. Noah held his forehead and sighed. All right, it's getting late, let's all go back and rest. With that, Noah simply pulled Linley's hand and walked in the direction of the dormitory. Ah. Linley let out a small cry, her pretty face blushing. Ugh. Claire, Fianna, and Alice glared at Noah's back, gnashing their teeth. Only Carol chuckled and followed, running in front to lead the way. Please come in. In front of a door, Carol opened the door and welcomed Noah in with a smile. This is my room with the eldest Mississippi. Oh. Noah walked into Linley's room and looked around. In terms of size and decoration, Linley's room wasn't much different from Alice's room. The difference was that Alice's room had dolls and was decorated with pink carpets, very girlish, while Linley's room had very tasteful decorations and furniture, full of elegance. It's a very tasteful room, Noah praised. It should be very comfortable to stay here. Hearing this, Linley, who had been waiting nervously for Noah's evaluation, immediately became happy, as if she was relieved, and a confident smile hung on her face. As the eldest daughter of the Lauren Frost family, this is a given. With that, Linley touched the edge of the wardrobe next to her and frowned slightly. However, I haven't cleaned the room today, so it's a little dusty. I'll have to clean it a little tomorrow. Do your best, Mississippi, Carol cheered Linley on. As long as eldest Miss makes a move, no matter what family matters it is, it will be a piece of cake. The room will become beautiful in an instant. Of course. Lynn Siley was a little too pleased with herself. Just watch me, Carol. Yes. Carol had a look of worship. Little did she know that this scene made Noah unable to look straight at it. Why does Linley, as the miss, have to clean the room, while Carol, as the maid, is cheering her on? What are you talking about? Linley said discontentedly. How can I let Carol do the housework? What if Carol's hands become rough? What about you? Noah's eyelids twitched. Won't your hands become rough? I'm Linley of the Ice Demon, and the Water Fairies are all my friends. Linley once again raised her head and puffed out her chest. How can my hands become rough? Don't say it, Mississippi, Carol urged. My stomach is almost flat from hunger, hurry up and cook for me. Sorry, I almost forgot. Linley seemed to have been awakened. She walked into the room, picked up an apron, and said to Noah while putting it on. You haven't eaten yet, right? I'll make one for you while I'm at it. Thank you. Noah looked at Carol, who was standing at the side and smiling at Linley, and laughed dryly. You're really not going to help your miss? Carol looked as if the sky was falling down. Why? I'm the one who wants to ask you why. Noah finally couldn't help but ridicule. You're a maid, right? Don't you have to take on work? Who said I don't? Carol's face tensed up. I'm taking on very important work. Oh? Noah asked. What is it? Carol said with a serious face. Of course it's to help the miss appraise the quality of the dishes. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched fiercely, and it was the kind that couldn't be stopped. After a long while, he turned his head and spoke as if he had given up. Is that so? That's really amazing. Really amazing. To be able to be so useless as a maid, Carol was indeed quite amazing. Chapter 995. It had been a long time since Noah had a dream. He had a dream of the final battle between the Saintess and the Demon King. It was as if he wanted to make up for all the previous dreams. Today, Noah once again watched the entire process of the final battle between the Saintess and the Demon King from the perspective of the Emperor. It was as if he wanted to finish the rest of the performance. Noah saw the saddest memory in his contracted sprite's life. Poochie. In the depths of the dark fortress, the dazzling silver holy sword that illuminated the space and dispelled the darkness directly pierced through the heart of the Demon King, who was burning with black flames all over his body, emitting an extremely cold light. Roah. With his heart pierced through, his entire body was enveloped by the radiance of the Demon Slayer. He had already turned into a lump of resentment, and the Demon King, who had lost all rationality, let out a hair-raising roar. Clang! The Vorpal sword, which belonged to the strongest sword dancer in the Demon King's hand, fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The spirit engravings that were branded on the Demon King's body, representing the 72 spirit pillars that he had enslaved, were gradually annihilated under the strong light, disappearing without a trace. It was just like what was mentioned in the legends. The Demon Slayer, which possessed a terrifying resistance to curses that could even break the contract between spirits and spirit users, directly dispelled the contract between the Demon King and the 72 spirit pillars that he had enslaved, freeing all of the Demon King's spirits. Under this strong light, the Demon King, who was like a lump of resentment, seemed to be purified and gradually dissipated. Not long after, he completely disappeared from this world. The Saintess, Alicia, who was holding the Demon Slayer, was pale and powerless as she sat on the ground. She had a duel to the death with the Demon King who had inherited the power of the Dark Elf King. Even if the other party was just a lump of resentment that had not fully awakened, he was still a terrifying opponent. Although she did not suffer any serious injuries, Alicia's divine power had long been exhausted, and her eyes were filled with deep fatigue. Clang! The Demon Slayer, in Alicia's hand, lit up and gradually turned into a human figure amidst a burst of light particles. That was the true form of the Demon Slayer, Aster. Master. Aster looked at his master. Although his face was expressionless, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. Are you all right? Aster. Alicia turned her gaze towards her contracted spirit. Looking at the extremely cute yet emotionless face of her contracted spirit, she smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'm fine. However, not only was Aster not at ease, but his heart clenched. Alicia might not have noticed. She, who was known as the Saintess, had a sad and heartbreaking smile on her face at this moment. Master. Aster's heart began to beat faster and he couldn't help but say. Are you really all right? Alicia did not say anything else and only looked at Aster. It was as if she wanted to forever remember Aster's appearance in her heart. The smile on her face became more and more sorrowful. She looked as if she had a bad premonition, causing Aster to have an ominous premonition. Kacha, right at this moment, a strange sound came from Alicia's body. It was as if something was gradually condensing. Then, under Aster's expression, the Saintess, who had a sad smile on her face, began to gradually change from her ankles. Gradually, it condensed into a beautiful spirit or crystal. Kacha kacha kacha, as the strange sound became more frequent, Alicia's body began to crystallize bit by bit, turning her soft body into a hard crystal. Moss. Master? Aster's expressionless face finally showed a panicked expression. Aster. Alicia placed her right hand that could still move on Aster's head. She still had that heart-wrenching smile on her face. Don't show such an expression. I knew this would happen from the start. As she said this, Alicia's fingertips began to crystallize as well. At this moment, Aster finally saw it. On the back of Alicia's hand, the spirit mark that represented the unbreakable contract between her and Aster was shining brightly. It was not the holy white light that Aster's spirit equipment emitted. Instead, it was a black light that resembled the night sky. Aster understood when he saw this. Alicia's crystallization originated from herself. It originated from her contract with the strongest sword spirit. This was something that even Aster did not know about. Because, before meeting Alicia, Aster had never formed a contract with any spirit. Hence, at this moment, Aster understood. It was a curse. In the past, the curse was broken by the Demon Slayer. The Demon Slayer had the highest level of curse resistance. It was a spirit equipment that could eliminate all spirit magic and curses. However, those curses did not disappear from this world. Instead, they accumulated in the Demon Slayer. When the accumulated curses in the Demon Slayer reached a critical point, the Demon Slayer would send all the curses back to its contractor. In other words, Aster was not a Demon Slayer. It allowed the user to exchange their life for great power. Aster was without a doubt a Demon Slayer. Now, after purifying Demon King Solomon, who had turned into a lump of resentment, the accumulated curses in the Demon Slayer had finally reached a critical point. How could this be? How could this be? Aster's trembling hand held onto Alicia's hand that had gradually turned into a hard spirit ore. He shook his head helplessly. Moss. Master. I didn't know. I didn't know this would happen. Hearing this, Alicia smiled faintly. I know, Aster didn't know this would happen. So, this is not your fault. Master. Aster's voice trembled. You knew this would happen, yet, that's right, Aster. Alicia gently stroked Aster's silver white hair while revealing a serene expression. I did it willingly. To save the continent that was being invaded by the Demon King. Alicia, who was known as the Saintess of Salvation, chose to fight despite knowing Aster's nature. She chose this ending. No. No. Aster's small hand carelessly stroked Alicia's gradually crystallized body. His tender voice trembled even more. No. Don't. Alicia only stared at Aster. Her expression became more and more serene, more and more gentle. In the end, Alicia left these words. Goodbye, Aster. With these words, the Saintess, who carried the expectations of an entire era and continued to fight against the Demon King, who had been alone all her life, had her entire head crystallized. Aster could only stare blankly at Alicia, who had crystallized like a statue. She still had a serene and gentle smile on her face, unable to return to her senses for a long time. Maintaining this appearance, Aster accompanied Alicia for 3 whole years. 3 years later, Aster personally sealed herself in a sword in the Demon King's castle. In order to not let her sinful self form a contract with someone else. In order to not lose the most important person. Before Aster fell into a deep sleep, she firmly made a vow to herself. In this life, she would never open her heart to anyone. Until that man appeared, gentle sunlight shone in from the window, waking Noah from his sleep. Noah slowly opened his eyes, but only stared at the ceiling. He reached out and tightly grasped Aster, who had turned into a dagger beside the pillow. His strength was strong enough to crush ordinary stones. After a while, Noah lifted the blanket and got up from the bed. On the bed beside him, Linley and Carol were hugging each other, sleeping very soundly. Noah brought Aster and quietly walked out of the room. Chapter 996. The early morning sun shone on the elf forest, filling the entire forest with a kind of vitality, which was especially heartwarming. On a small stone path, Noah was holding Aster's hand as they slowly walked into the depths of the forest. Aster held Noah's hand while matching Noah's pace. His head was tilted as he stared at Noah. His mysterious eyes were filled with doubt. Master, do you have something to say to me? Yesterday, Aster had been resting due to Noah's request. The elven device in the form of a dagger was carried by Noah. Therefore, Aster didn't know what happened yesterday. However, Noah suddenly woke Aster up and brought him for a walk in the elven forest. Aster's intuition told him that Noah had something important to tell him. However, half an hour had passed since they entered the elven forest. In this half an hour, Noah didn't speak to Aster at all. He only walked forward, causing Aster's doubt to grow. In the end, Aster could only say this. Did I do something wrong? Is Master going to punish me in a very perverted way? Noah's indifferent expression was destroyed by Aster's words. His entire face fell. Why would you have such a thought? Didn't Master say this before? Aster blinked. If you did something wrong, then you would be punished in a very perverted way. That was used to scare Alice. I didn't really intend to do that. Noah's face was bitter. Aster, you didn't take it seriously, did you? Aster looked at Noah in disbelief. It was as if he was saying, isn't that so? All right. Noah sighed. I didn't intend to punish you in a perverted way. It's not that Aster did anything wrong. I just wanted to have a good chat with Aster. Aster looked straight at Noah, his pair of mysterious eyes began to flicker. Being stared at by Aster, Noah didn't walk forward. He stopped and let go of Aster's hand. He squatted in front of Aster, maintaining eye contact with him. Aster seemed to have seen something from Noah's pitch-black eyes. The indescribable expression in his eyes became more and more shaken. Don't tell me you already know? Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he extended his hand and rubbed Aster's head like before. Are you referring to the fact that you have the ability to curse a contractor? Aster fell silent after hearing this. I saw it. Noah continued to rub Aster's head. His gaze didn't leave Aster's sight. Your previous contractor, the Saintess of Salvation, Alicia's final outcome. Aster's eyes rippled with uncontrollable emotions. However, the pair of eyes that used to sparkle seemed to have dimmed at this moment. They had lost a lot of their luster. I only found out about it then, Aster said expressionlessly. I'm a demonic sword with a curse that will eventually kill its owner. I'm not a holy sword. Although Aster's face didn't have any expression, his eyes revealed traces of sorrow. Alicia died because of me. If I knew I was such an ominous sword, I definitely wouldn't have formed a contract with anyone. However, this small wish wasn't realistic at all. Because Alicia had a curse that would eventually kill its owner. Apart from forming a contract with the Elven Envoy and witnessing it with one's own eyes, there was no other way to find out. Unless, from the very beginning, Aster didn't know that he was cursed and would never sign a contract with any elves. Otherwise, when Aster found out about his true nature, he would have personally witnessed his own curse killing his owner. This matter was quite ironic. As the highest grade elven device, I can break any curse in this world, but I can't break my own curse. Aster looked straight at Noah as though he wasn't talking about himself. A holy sword that can even kill a demon king. If the main body of the holy sword is a powerful force that can only be exchanged with one's life, then it wouldn't be strange for it to be able to kill a demon king who has inherited the power of the Dark Elf King. Listening to Aster's self-deprecating words, Noah continued to rub Aster's head. His gaze was full of tolerance. At this moment, Aster couldn't hold it in any longer. He looked away from Noah's gaze and spoke softly. My existence itself is a sin. Master, actually, I don't have the qualifications to become anyone's sword. Along with this sentence, an indescribably heavy atmosphere filled the surroundings. However, Noah laughed. His laughter dispelled the heavy atmosphere in the surroundings. Is that what you really think? Noah looked straight at Aster. If that's what you really think, then why did you form a contract with me? Because. Aster's tone couldn't help but carry some emotions. Isn't it because Master is immune to all curses? Isn't it the same as me, or even higher than me? The legendary Demon Slayer indeed didn't have the qualifications to form a contract with any elven envoy. However, that was under the circumstance that it would eventually kill its owner. If the elven envoy had the ability to not be affected by curses, then what would happen? At that time, Aster, who intended to reject Noah's contract, couldn't help but accept Noah's contract when he found out that Noah had such resistance to curses. Furthermore, in order to carve the elven mark on Noah's body that could even nullify the elven contract, Aster had almost exhausted all of his strength to maintain his form. What did this prove? You must be very lonely, right? Noah said with some pity. Being sealed in the sword for days, Master. Aster's eyes wavered. Don't want to form a contract with anyone. That's just a lie. Noah exposed Aster's feelings. Otherwise, after knowing that I won't be affected by curses, you wouldn't have used up all your energy to engrave the elven engraving on me and form a contract with me. I know, you must be very lonely. Noah smiled and patted Aster's head. But, that ends here. In this world, there was no other elven envoy more suitable than Noah to form a contract with Aster. Because, Aster's curse couldn't affect Noah at all. You once said that you hope that I won't die before you, right? At this moment, Noah's tone was unusually gentle. Listen well, Aster, I definitely won't die. So, you have to be my sword forever and live happily, understand? Master. Aster raised his eyes and stared at Noah. His eyes lit up again. Then, Aster took a deep breath. His voice was unprecedentedly strong and powerful. Then, I ask Master to form a contract with me. You definitely won't die before me. Oath. That was a ceremony used to swear an oath between elves and elven envoys. The contents of the oath were decided by the two parties who intended to make the oath, and it was established under the witness of the ceremony. Once the oath was broken, the breaching party, no matter if it was the elven envoy or the elven envoy, would be severely punished. For example, if there was an elven envoy who broke the oath, that person would not be able to receive the blessings of the elven envoy for a long period of time, and would be hated by other elves. In serious cases, they would even lose the ability to summon elves. Because it was such an effective ceremony, the contents of the oath ceremony were even seen as a step to form a formal contract with a high-ranking elven envoy. And the content of the oath was that after making the oath, they would kiss each other. I hereby swear that I will live forever as your sword. Alice couldn't help but lean into Noah's embrace. She raised her chin and stared at Noah. So, please also make an oath that you definitely won't die before me. After he finished speaking, Aster closed his eyes and lifted his chin to look at Noah. When making the contract, although it had to be kissed for it to take effect, it didn't specify where it had to be kissed. Logically speaking, even kissing the back of the hand was enough to establish the oath. However, there was also an unwritten rule that when making the oath, the more important the location of the kiss, the stronger the effect of the oath. So, to Witch-G, who had to maintain her purity, and the elves who only opened their hearts to Witch-G, kissing the lips was definitely the most important location. It was obvious how much Aster valued this oath. Looking at the beautiful elven girl snuggling up in his arms and asking for a kiss from him, Noah did not have any evil thoughts in his heart. Instead, there was only endless pity and warmth. I also hereby swear that as long as Aster lives as my sword, I will never die before you. Leaving these words, Noah captured Aster's lips without hesitation. Chapter 997. Chirp. After an unknown amount of time, Noah finally let go of the extremely soft lips. He lowered his head and looked at Aster, who was nestled in his embrace. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. He suddenly smiled. Aster was still expressionless. However, this elf girl's eyes were filled with a mysterious feeling. Her lake-like clear spirit swayed as if she was reminiscing about something or was intoxicated by something. She didn't look away and just looked at Noah. Everything was understood without words. Just as the warm atmosphere spread between Noah and Aster, Noah's heart suddenly moved. He abruptly turned his head and looked to the side. Almost at the same time, a clear laughter like a silver bell echoed and entered Noah and Aster's ears. To be able to find a master who is so considerate of her, Miss Sacred Sword seems to be quite lucky this time. The sudden laughter woke Aster up and made her react. She turned her head and looked at the source of the voice. On a nearby tree, there was a young girl wearing a dark-colored dress. Her beautiful black waist-length hair swayed in the wind. She was like a fairy of the night. She was sitting on a tree branch with her little legs crossed. She was looking down at Noah and Aster. Her delicate face had an innocent and unfathomable smile. Aster's expressionless face carried an undetectable vigilance. Dark elf, the newcomer was Lestia. However, when Aster looked at Lestia, Noah's gaze went past her and stared at the bottom of the tree where Lestia was. There was another girl standing there. She was wearing an exotic costume similar to a witch's costume. She also had a head of beautiful black hair. However, her temperament wasn't as dark as Lestia's. Instead, it was more peaceful. Almost all the elf envoys on the continent knew this girl. We actually met here? The girl who was hailed as the strongest sword dancer met Noah's gaze and lightly opened her red lips. Perhaps, this is fate? Destiny? Noah raised an eyebrow and curled his lips into a smile. Don't push everything to fate. You're only here because you don't want to leave, right? No, we have already left this place. Lotus gently shook her head. However, we received a piece of news midway, so we came back. That's how it is, Losty giggled as she sat on a tree. Thanks to this, I got to see a pretty good show. Noah narrowed his eyes, stood up, and looked at Lestia. Is that Geo Inzaxi really related to you? Geo Inzak? Lotus frowned and raised her head to look at Lestia on the tree. Lestia, what are you doing behind my back again? Era, Ren, can you not blame me every time you hear something bad? Lestia shrugged. I only told that guy who calls himself the Demon King the news that would interest him. Other than that, I didn't do anything else. Hearing this, Lien's tone became a little reproachful. But, I didn't know about this either. I just felt that there was no need to tell you about such a small fry, Lestia said matter-of-factly. Interacting with such a stupid guy will only lower your class, Ren. Seeing that Lestia didn't seem to think that she did anything wrong, Lotus could only helplessly sigh. You're always like this, doing things behind my back that I don't know about. Lotus said as she looked at Noah again. That man came from the academy like me. Although he's a little clever, he shouldn't be able to do anything to you. Academy? Noah felt like he had heard this name somewhere before. Are you talking about the assassin training facility that was exposed 4 years ago? 4 years ago, an organization that specialized in training assassins was nearly destroyed due to an unknown incident, and was exposed to the eyes of the entire continent. After that, the Empire sent out a group of knights to investigate the assassin training organization. The result was shocking. The so-called assassin training facility was actually built with the support of many nobles in the Empire. Because of this, a huge storm was set off in the Empire. All the nobles behind the assassin training facility were exposed, causing a huge commotion in the Empire. After that, the Empire's knights completely annihilated the assassin training organization. Most of the orphans in the organization were protected by the Empire. After a long period of time, the situation gradually calmed down. Because of this, the assassin training organization's name was widely spread in the Empire. Noah remembered that when he was collecting information about this world, he had inadvertently seen a record of this matter in a document. The assassin training facility's name was the Academy. Lotus and Geo both came from that academy? Doesn't that mean, in the past, I was once trained as a tool to kill people? Lotus did not try to hide anything and made a declaration in a straightforward manner. Although, I haven't killed anyone yet. From Lotus's words, Noah did not detect a trace of falsehood. In the records of the academy, Noah also remembered that at that time, other than most of the orphans being protected by the Empire, there was a small number of orphans who took the opportunity to escape and sneaked around the world. Lotus and Geo were probably part of this small number of orphans, right? Noah immediately asked. In other words, you're really in cahoots with Geo and Zagi? Lotus would never be in cahoots with such a tasteless person. Losti spoke before Lotus could speak. It's just that that guy seems to be very easy to use. That's why I found him. It has nothing to do with Lotus. Then what are you planning to do with that guy? Noah looked at Losti with a hint of mockery in his eyes. Don't tell me you're planning to use that guy to deal with me? After the previous dispute with Lotus, Losti once went to Noah alone and threatened to stop Noah from taking the world fragment from Lotus. Could it be that Losti used Geo for this purpose? However, Lestia only smiled mischievously at him. That kind of fake demon king probably can't even deal with elven envoys at the level of the 12 knight generals, so how can he deal with you? Then why did you let that guy come to me? Noah frowned. Don't tell me you want to see my performance again. Even if I don't say anything, the news about you will spread to the entire continent. When that imposter hears the news, she will still come looking for you. Lestia lowered her head and glanced at Lotus, who was still under the tree. However, I didn't expect that the fake would cause something interesting to jump out. Something interesting? Noah's frown deepened as he stared at Lotus. Speaking of which, you just said that you came back because you heard some news that you cared about, right? Lotus didn't nod or shake her head. She only hesitated for a moment before asking Noah. In the Elven Academy of Alicia, there is an elven envoy called Versilia Eva Farangelto, right? Versilia? Noah didn't expect to suddenly hear this name from Lotus's mouth. He was a little surprised all of a sudden. Did you come back because of Versilia? Lotus nodded. Then, she thought about it carefully and shook her head. That's not right. I can only say that Versilia Eva Farangelto is part of the reason why I came back. Noah and Aster looked at each other. What's the matter? Losti teased Noah, trying to keep him in suspense. Don't you want to know what we want to do? What you want to do has nothing to do with me. Noah's furrowed brows slowly relaxed as he spoke indifferently. However, if you still want to come after me, I won't hold back anymore." After saying this, Noah was about to leave with Aster when Lotus suddenly spoke. "If possible, I hope you can help me a little." Noah's footsteps suddenly stopped. Chapter 998. Help. Noah slowly turned around and didn't say anything. He signaled for Lotus to continue with her words with his eyes. On the other hand, Losti, who was sitting on the tree, frowned slightly. "Lotus, are you sure you want to ask him for help?" "With his help, it will be much easier for us," Lotus said without hesitation. "After all, I'm not a student of that academy. I can't act openly in that academy. With your abilities, even if you barge into the Elven Academy openly, no one will be able to do anything to you, right?" Losti still couldn't let it go. "Even if you don't want to barge in so recklessly, you can still sneak in." Although Lotus was known as the strongest sword dancer and was famous for her beautiful sword dances, she had also been trained as an assassin in the academy. Her ability to hide and sneak in was definitely not ordinary. With her abilities, it wouldn't be difficult for her to sneak into the Elven Academy. However, Lotus shook her head. "Indeed, it wouldn't be difficult for me to sneak into the academy. But that's only if the witch isn't there." "That witch?" Lastia's tone was filled with doubt. "Even if it's Grey and Vath, they won't be able to do anything to you, right? Don't forget, Lotus could freely use the power of the Dark Elf King. If she used that power, even the strongest elf on the continent wouldn't be able to do anything to her." "Losti, you're underestimating that witch. She might not be as strong as I am now, but if I sneak into the Elven Academy, it'll be fine if I don't meet her. But if I do, I'll definitely be discovered," Lotus said with certainty. "That witch has spent more than half of her life being assassinated by others. Her mental acuity has been honed to a terrifying level. If you want to hide, it's impossible to not be discovered in front of that witch." Noah secretly agreed with Lotus's words. Even Noah with the invisibility helmet was discovered by Grey and Vath, let alone others. "If possible, I don't want to have any contact with that witch at all." Lotus's tone would only become extremely displeased when Grey and Vaz were mentioned. "The most frightening thing about that witch isn't her strength. You should understand that, Lestia." Restia was speechless. Noah could understand why Lotus was so disgusted with Grey and Vaz. Because there was a time when Noah, like Lotus, hated that witch to death. When teaching Noah, the witch never used the method of oral teaching. Instead, she directly made Noah feel it with his body. For example, in order to teach Noah the initial form of the absolute sword skill, Grey and Vath would suddenly use purple lightning when Noah was asleep and attack Noah mercilessly. According to her, being attacked in such an unguarded situation was the most memorable thing for a person. Only in this way could the absolute sword skill be firmly engraved in Noah's mind. In addition, Grey and Vath also used all kinds of swindling methods to make Noah hunt all kinds of powerful elves in the elven forest. Even the sleeping demon god elves in the deepest part of the forest were awakened and then made Noah use the absolute sword skill to deal with them. Apart from that, no other power was allowed. During that time, Noah really wanted to do all kinds of things to that witch. Even Noah was like that. Lotus, who was also taught the absolute sword skill by Grey and Vath when she was young, must have suffered even worse treatment, right? Lotus wasn't afraid of Grey and Vath. Lotus just didn't want to be swindled by that witch again and trigger those unbearable memories of the past. To put it simply, Lotus was almost traumatized by Grey and Vath. Moreover, it's not very appropriate for me to directly contact Versilia Eva Farangelto. Lotus turned her gaze back to Noah. "So, I hope you can help me verify whether Versilia Eva Farangelto has been transplanted with the incantation rune." Incantation rune? Noah was stunned. Incantation rune. To put it simply, it was a kind of incantation that was artificially added to the elven user. The effect of this incantation was different from the elven incantation that was obtained after forming a contract with the elves. It had all kinds of strange abilities. For example, it could forcefully draw out the elves' abilities, or add different attributes to the elves, or even greatly increase the elves' divine might. Because of this powerful effect, incantation rune was widely used during the Lombard War. However, due to the inexplicable side effects of the incantation, many people died one after another. It was very inhumane. Therefore, after the war, the incantation had been banned by the various countries. No more transplants were allowed to be carried out. Of course, that was on the surface. In the dark, some countries and organizations were still conducting research on spell engraving. You're saying that Versilia has been transplanted with the incantation rune? Noah asked. What's going on? I don't know the details. Lotus turned around and looked in the direction of the Elven Academy. I'm only here because an acquaintance told me that Versilia Eva Farangelto might have been transplanted with the incantation rune. Moreover, it's because of me. You? Noah was confused. Then, he realized something. Could it be? Lotus was silent for a moment. After a while, she spoke in a low voice. I have a wish that I want to fulfill no matter what. So, 3 years ago, I participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. This sentence made Celestia, who was sitting on the tree, fall silent. At that time, I only had this wish in my eyes and heart. Lotus's voice sounded as if it came from the distant horizon, echoing in the surroundings. For the sake of this wish, 3 years ago, I only blindly defeated the enemies in front of me. At that time, they were also just enemies. Other than that, whether it was their name, appearance, or even identity, they were all unimportant. Versilia Eva Farangelto. Lotus sighed. I only knew this name after the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Hearing this, Noah more or less sympathized with Versilia. Undoubtedly, Versilia was so obsessed with Lotus because she wanted to prove herself. At that time, Lotus didn't even care about Versilia. She only knew Versilia's name after the Elven Sword Dance Festival. If Noah was in her shoes, it was imaginable how unwilling he would be. An acquaintance of mine told me that Versilia Eva Farangelto might have gone astray because of me. She might have transplanted spells into her body, Lotus said in a deep voice. On the way, I heard that Versilia Eva Farangelto had rushed back to Alicia Elven Academy overnight because of me. That's why I came back. Why? Noah stared at Lotus's back. Could it be that you feel that you owe Versilia something? Lotus didn't answer Noah's question. Instead, she spoke in a decisive tone. If it's really because of the past me that Versilia Eva Farangelto chose this path of destruction, then I have to personally resolve this grudge. Then, Lotus turned around and looked at Noah. For this reason, I need to confirm whether Versilia Eva Farangelto has transplanted the incantation. However, it's not convenient for me to move around Alicia Elven Academy as I don't want to cause any trouble. So, I need your help. Oh. Noah raised an eyebrow. You want me to help you confirm whether Versilia transplanted spells into her body? Because of me, you've also been targeted by Versilia Eva Farangel, haven't you? Ren said. You'll have to face Versilia Eva Farangelto sooner or later anyway. My matter is just a matter of convenience to you, right? But, don't forget. Noah glanced at Lastia. I'm not so kind as to help someone who keeps finding trouble with me. Lastia smiled sweetly. Lotus, that's what I said. Lotus's eyes flickered. After a while, she sighed and pressed her hand on her heart. Then, for the sake of this heart, how about you help me this time? This time, Noah was at his wit's end. Chapter 999. Alicia Elven Academy, outside the entrance square. Lotus furrowed her beautiful brows as she stared at the entrance of the Alicia Elven Academy that had just been visited in an unfriendly manner. Do we really have to sneak in? You've asked this question no less than 10 times, and I've answered it nearly 10 times, Noah said in annoyance. Didn't you say that if Versilia wanted to implant the spell, you would have to do it yourself? But we haven't confirmed if Versilia Eva has the rune yet, right? Lotus's brows were still furrowed. So, before you confirm if Versilia Eva has the rune, I can just wait for your news in the elven forest. I'm just here to assist, Noah reminded her. After all, I'm not close to Versilia at all. Even if I want to confirm if she has the rune, I can't just do it openly, right? Do you want me to strip Versilia naked to see if there are any runes on her body? But Lotus was still a little reluctant. That witch is also inside. When I think of this, I don't want to go in at all. Are you that resistant to Grey Eva? Noah face-bombed and sighed. Then, it's fine as long as you don't meet Grey Eva, right? Are you going to cover for me to sneak in? Lotus didn't seem to be optimistic about this plan at all. The witch's intuition is very sharp. Even if I've received special training in infiltration, once I'm caught by the witch's sharp sense of smell, there's no way I won't be exposed. Don't worry. Noah suddenly smiled. You don't have to sneak in. You just have to be like me and walk in openly. Walk in openly? Lotus looked at Noah in confusion. Noah didn't answer Lotus's question. Instead, he reached out his hand. A golden ripple appeared in front of Noah's outstretched hand and was probed by Noah. Lotus was slightly taken aback when she saw this. What is this? Noah couldn't be bothered to explain. He groped around in the golden ripples and finally took out a helmet-like hat. This is the helmet of invisibility. Noah tossed the helmet to Lotus. As long as you wear it, not only can it hide your figure, it can also eliminate your smell and voice. This way, you can openly walk in with me. You actually have such a miraculous item? Lotus fiddled with the invisibility helmet in her hand in surprise, but after a while, she shook her head. However, even if it's such a miraculous thing, it definitely won't be able to escape the sharp senses of that witch. Before Noah could respond to Lotus's words, the pitch-black knight's sword at her waist glowed faintly and made a sound. Lotus, don't you care too much about the Twilight Witch? I've snuck into this academy twice and wasn't discovered. That's because you haven't met that witch yet, Celestia. Lotus shook her head. If you meet that witch, as long as you approach her just a little bit, you will definitely be discovered. That witch is already instinctive when she discovers that you are sneaking around her. Just as Lotus's voice fell, the silver steel sword at Noah's waist in the form of a short sword also glowed faintly and made a sound. You've approached Master twice and Master has also discovered you. You should be glad that you didn't approach Master with hostility, Dark Elf. Oh. Celestia, who had transformed into a pitch-black knight's sword, provoked. If I approached your master with hostility, what would you do? Miss Sacred Sword? Of course I would destroy you. Aster, who had transformed into a short sword, replied emotionlessly. It wouldn't be the first time I've destroyed you anyway. Ha. Celestia's bell-like laughter began to reverberate, but there wasn't much joy in her laughter. You really dare to say that, Miss Sacred Sword, the two legendary holy swords and demon swords that once belonged to the Saintess and the Demon King respectively became more dazzling, causing a hostile atmosphere to pervade the surroundings. Seeing this, Noah and Lotus were somewhat helpless. Who knew if it was because they were mortal enemies in the past, but Aster and Celestia didn't seem to get along well. This wasn't the first time the two highest-ranked elves quarreled. Immediately, Noah hurriedly returned to the topic at hand. Indeed, Grey Vath's senses are terrifyingly sharp. Even if you wear this helmet, you won't be able to hide from her. But as long as you don't have any hostility towards her, unless she directly passes by you, it will be very difficult for her to discover you. Is that so? Lotus muttered to herself and nodded. All right then, I'll give it a try. But what should I do after sneaking in? Let's go and meet my teammates first. Noah had already thought about it. Not only am I not familiar with Versilia, but our relationship is also very bad. It's not suitable for you to directly contact Versilia, so we'll need their help. Your teammates? Lotus had some reaction to this sentence. The teammates who participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival with you? Yes. Noah asked curiously. Is there a problem? Lotus was silent for a moment, then said this sentence. Your teammates seem to be Claire Lucio and Fianna Rayo Deja, right? Oh. Noah raised an eyebrow. You seem to know quite well. Celestia told me everything. Lotus touched the invisibility helmet in her hand and nodded as if she had thought of something. All right, let's go and meet them. What's wrong? Noah glanced at Lotus. Have you ever interacted with Claire and Phaena? You can say so. Lotus said. I've told you before that Versilia was told to me by an acquaintance, and that acquaintance has an extraordinary relationship with Claire Lucio and Phaena Rheodesia. After saying this, Lien sighed again. Moreover, I've also interacted with the princess before. Lotus did not say anything else and put on the invisibility helmet. As Lotus put on the invisibility helmet, the figure that had captivated countless elves gradually disappeared into the air. Noah, with his sensing ability, could vaguely sense Lotus' presence beside him. And without his sensing ability, even Noah would have a hard time discovering Lotus's existence, wouldn't he? I really don't know how sharp the witch's senses are, to be able to detect. It was hard to tell whether Noah's words were out of admiration or admiration. Then, he walked through the gate of Alicia Elven Academy. Walking in the Alicia Elf Academy, Noah walked towards the dormitory of the Crow class at a leisurely pace. Around him, groups of students wearing Elven Academy uniforms were walking back and forth. When they saw Noah, not only did they cast their usual curious and fearful gazes at Noah, they even started whispering amongst themselves. Look, that male elven user didn't bring the fire cat and ice demon from the Crow class with him today. Aren't those two problematic children from the Crow class the elven user's pets? Yeah, I heard that they're the elven user's pets at night. It's not just the fire cat and ice demon from the Crow class, even the leader of the Wind King Knights was taken by him. So impure, yeah, so lousy, but he's an expert who can compete with Lotus Asubble. Yeah, his sword dance is exactly the same as Lotus Asubble's. His sword dance is so beautiful. Yeah, I saw it too. Now that I think about it, I really envy the fire cat and ice demon from the Crow class. I also want to experience the feeling of being his pet. I know. Similar conversations continued to spread from all around, causing Noah's face to twitch. Noah could even feel that there was an unusually disdainful gaze fixed on him, causing him to feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. At this moment, a rather cold voice suddenly sounded. Where have you been? Chapter 1000. Where did you go? When such a slightly cold voice sounded, whether it was Noah who was attracted by the surrounding whispers or Lotus who was wearing an invisible helmet, they were all startled. Because, to Noah and Lotus, this voice was too familiar. Immediately, Noah and Lotus both turned their gazes to the front. In front of the school building, Greyvath was slowly walking towards Noah with strong and forceful steps. Whoosh! At this moment, Lotus, who was in the invisible state, took a big step forward without hesitation. With a faint sound of breaking through the air, she shot towards the bushes in the distance. Greyvath, who was walking towards Noah, slightly paused and frowned. Why does it feel like something suddenly disappeared? Hearing Greyvath's muttering, Noah was almost scared again. Lotus was right. Greyvath's senses were really sharp to a terrifying extent. Just now, if Lotus didn't escape in time, Greyvath would have definitely discovered it. The scariest part was yet to come. It seems to have disappeared from that direction, right? Greyvath cast her gaze to the trees in the distance, and the small glasses on her face flashed with a trace of light. Well, since I have nothing to do anyway, maybe I can find something interesting. After saying this, Greyvath wanted to ignore Noah and walk towards the direction where Lotus was hiding. Noah was about to break out in cold sweat. He quickly said. What? Do you need something from me? Nothing, I just saw you go out so early, so I just asked. Greyvath's mind didn't seem to be on Noah. She waved at Noah. Since you don't have anything to do, hurry up and go back to accompany those ladies of yours. Although they are a little innocent, if you train them well, they will definitely become good pets. Who wants to train those ladies into pets? Noah retorted. So that's how you see me all along? Oh. Don't you like innocent little girls? Greyvath finally turned her gaze to Noah, the corner of her mouth raised. Or do you want to change your taste and play with mature adults? Do you want me to satisfy you? You just want to know what your head is made of, which, Noah said with some dissatisfaction. Do you really want to play with men younger than you? Don't misunderstand, I only do this to interesting people, Grey Vath said with a smile. So, don't worry. I'm not the kind of fickle woman you think I am. You can verify it if you want. Unfortunately, I have no interest in old women who are about to turn 40, Noah's tone became nasty. You'd better go somewhere else and find someone interesting you like. Leaving this sentence, Noah turned around and left. Only now did Noah understand Lotus's dislike for Grey Vath. This witch's personality was really nasty. Seeing Noah leave, Grey Vath snorted softly. She lifted her feet again and walked in the direction of the bushes where Lotus was hiding. However, at this time, Lotus had already found an opportunity to leave. So, Grey Vath was destined to not discover anything. After turning into a corner, Noah let out a sigh of relief. Don't tell me that witch has the same sensory ability as I do. As soon as his voice fell, another voice sounded from behind Noah. I told you, that witch's sense of smell is terrifyingly sharp. If it wasn't for this helmet, I would have been discovered. After taking off the helmet, Lotus, who revealed her body, seemed to have some lingering fear. I really don't want to deal with that witch anymore. I feel the same. Noah spread his hands and glanced at Lotus. However, this way, Grey Vath will be led to another place. I don't have to worry about running into her anymore. That's true. Lotus nodded. To be safe, I'll wait until I reach my destination. After saying that, Lotus put on the helmet of invisibility again and disappeared into thin air. Seeing Lotus disappear again, Noah let out a sigh of relief and continued to walk toward the dormitory of the Crow class. After returning to Lindsley's room, Noah opened the door and several gazes were cast on Noah. Immediately after, those gazes all turned into angry glares filled with anger. Ugh! Noah's expression suddenly became resentful. In Lindsley's room, whether it was Lindsley, Claire, Fayanna, or Alice, they were all present. Only Carol was nowhere to be seen. She was probably still sleeping. Meanwhile, the gazes of the group of young ladies towards Noah were filled with fury. Hey, Noah! Lindley smiled sweetly, but no matter how one looked at it, that smile seemed to be angry. Can you explain why you weren't here so early in the morning? Claire, Fayanna, and Alice didn't speak, but their angry gazes revealed that they were all thinking the same thing. Under the furious gazes of the girls, Noah scratched his cheek and asked tentatively. Did I make you guys worried? As soon as these words were spoken, the four girls surprisingly reacted in unison, and all of them retorted. Who? Who was worried about you? That's right. We were just afraid that you'd go out and do some dirty things again. That's right. Noah didn't know what to say. There should be a limit to being arrogant, right? What was Chi-Chi going to do with being arrogant? By the way, why are you all here? Noah walked into the room and asked curiously. There isn't a team competition today, right? We're here to study a new battle plan. Claire was the first to speak. Now that we have Fayanna in our team, we should be able to organize more flexible tactics, right? Although the Gods' Parliament didn't teach us the techniques of sword dance, they taught us a lot of ritual music. Fayanna volunteered. So, you guys will be the ones to fight. I'll dance ritual music for you guys from the back to support you. This was a very big help. One had to know that ritual music was different from sword dance in that it could give elven users all kinds of support and effects. If there was a witch proficient in ritual music, it would be very advantageous for a team battle. Not to mention, Fayanna wasn't an ordinary witch. She had been recommended and almost became an elven witch who stood at the top of all witches. With Fayanna's help, it would definitely be a big advantage for Claire and Lindsley. Of course, Noah wouldn't be able to do that. After all, the auxiliary effects of ritual music would be bounced off by Noah's body. Come to think of it, Claire and Linley should be very clear about the great help that Fianna could bring, which was why they had gathered so early in the morning to discuss tactics. As for Alice, this Knight Leader's reason seemed to be a bit hesitant. I'm just here to see if you've done anything bad. It seemed like this Knight Leader was still worried about nothing as usual, but it's great that you're all here. Noah turned around and closed the door, even locking it. This action caused the group of young ladies to be startled at first. Then, they seemed to have thought of something and their faces all flushed red. What do you want to do? Claire pointed at Noah with a red face. Why did you lock the door? You're not planning to do something shameful, are you? Lindsay glared at Noah, her pretty face a bit red. What do you want to do to us? I didn't expect classmate Noah to have such a strong taste. Fianna's smile seemed to be a bit stiff. No matter what, if the 5 of us are together, it's really a bit, you've been planning this all along? Alice's hand reflexively reached for the hilt of the knight's sword at her waist. Watch me make you into fish sauce sushi. Beast. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and he sighed heavily. Your delusions can break through the heavens. You can even think of that when you lock the door. How passionate are you? Passionate? The group of 4 girls froze on the spot. It was as if he was right. There was blame. In short, there was everything. What's wrong? Noah asked curiously. Do you really know each other? 3 years ago, when I was still participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, I met Princess Fianna, who came to watch the Elven Sword Dance Festival as a VIP in the Elven Forest of the Elemental Elf Realm, Lotus said. At that time, Princess Fianna accidentally entered the Elemental Elf Forest alone and was attacked by elves. I happened to save her. Undoubtedly, at that time, you promised me that you would meet me again after the Elemental Sword Dance Festival. Fianna pouted as if she was throwing a tantrum. I've been waiting for you, but in the end, you didn't come. I'm sorry. Lotus was silent for a while and finally squeezed out this sentence. It's not that I didn't want to go, and it's not that I don't remember. It's just that after the Elemental Sword Dance Festival ended, I was teleported out of the Elemental Elf world and couldn't rush over. Teleported out of the Elemental Elf world? Fianna was stunned. What do you mean? I can't tell you the details. Lotus closed her eyes. In short, I'm the one who didn't keep my promise, so it's natural for you to hate me. It's not to the extent that I hate you. Fianna said awkwardly. I'm just a little angry, a little. I'm sorry. Lotus could only smile bitterly. At this moment, Claire, Linley, and Alice finally reacted from the shock of the person they were looking forward to suddenly appearing in front of them. Without any hesitation, the 3 girls no longer cared about being in contact with Noah. They rushed to Noah's side and squeezed their delicate bodies into Noah's body. What's going on? Claire deliberately lowered her voice, but she couldn't hide the trace of panic in her voice. Why would the strongest sword dancer appear here? And it seems like you brought her in, right? Linley looked at Noah with resentment and even tears in her eyes. Claire and the others came so early today, I didn't even have time to clean the room. What if they saw something strange? Don't you have a bad relationship with Lady Lotus Asubble? Alice glared at Noah. So the so-called bad relationship is to the extent that you can bring her into the room? It was no wonder that Claire, Linley, and Alice had such a big reaction. Lotus was the person these girls looked forward to the most. Now, the object of their dreams had appeared in front of these young girls. How could these young girls not have such a big reaction? What's more, the last time Lotus came to Alicia Elven Academy, she came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Therefore, in the eyes of these girls, it was more inconceivable than anything that a high and mighty idol like Lotus would suddenly come into close contact with them. Can you all calm down first? Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Anyway, let Lotus explain it to you first. After saying that, Noah looked at Lotus. Lotus nodded and looked around at the group of girls. There's something I want to ask for your help with. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice looked at each other in dismay once again. Impossible. Alice took a step forward and shouted at Lotus in agitation. How could Big Sister Versilia know how to use incantations? Alice. Claire and Linley were both shocked and hurriedly pulled Alice back. Calm down. Only then did Alice realize that she was yelling at the person she yearned for the most. She immediately panicked. Sorry. It's fine. Lotus shook her head and said to Alice. Like I said, I'm not sure whether Versilia Eva has the incantation rune or not, but one of my acquaintances told me that Versilia Eva seems to have been in contact with people from the Skeleton Alliance. Hearing this news, everyone present fell silent. The so-called Skeleton Alliance was actually an underground organization that conducted all kinds of illegal transactions and research. This organization's influence covered almost the entire continent and could be seen in every country. One of the trades and research conducted by this illegal underground organization was the transplanting and research of spell engravings. If Versilia had come into contact with people from the Skeleton Alliance, then it was possible that she had transplanted incantations. Your sister seems to have an overly strong obsession with me. Lotus stared at Alice. If it was because of me that she was implanted with the spell rune, then I have to take responsibility for it. But, Alice said softly. Elder sister shouldn't have touched things like incantations and engravings. When she said this, even Alice's tone wasn't very certain. After all, Alice was very clear about Versilia's obsession with Lotus. There was no way to eliminate this possibility. The most important thing now is to confirm it. Lotus said sincerely. So, I hope you can help me. Chapter 1002. Hearing Lotus's words, whether it was Claire, Linley, Fayanna, or Alice, they all fell silent. Versilia Eva Farangelto. Although this girl's reputation wasn't as resounding as Lotus, she was still very famous in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. No matter what, Versilia was an elf envoy who had once stepped onto the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. To be able to step onto the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, which was the largest ceremony in the world, was enough to prove how outstanding Versilia was as an elf envoy. To put it bluntly, in the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire, there was almost no elf envoy under the age of 20 who could match Versilia. Otherwise, Versilia wouldn't have been taken in as the adopted daughter of the Duke of Frangalto due to her exceptional talent and strength as an elven envoy. She even became a candidate for one of the 12 knights 3 years ago. If Versilia hadn't met Lotus in the preliminary round, then with her strength at that time, she would have definitely been able to squeeze into the top 4. Now, 3 years had passed, and Versilia was definitely stronger than before. She had even become the strongest elven envoy in the Elven Academy. She had the ability to single-handedly defeat demonkin elves without taking any damage. If Versilia had only obtained this strength after using a spell engraving, then wouldn't many people be disappointed? This was especially true for Alice. However, as Versilia's younger sister, Alice was the first to speak. I understand, I will assist you. Everyone turned to look at Alice in shock. In response, Alice only bit her lip. If it was the Versilia of the past, then she definitely wouldn't have touched a spell engraving. However, ever since she was defeated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago, Versilia completely changed. She became cold and ruthless and pursued power without regard for anything else. It's not strange at all that such a sister would use a spell engraving. Hearing this, Lotus lowered her eyes and spoke softly. My apologies. No, that's not your fault. Alice shook her head. You are merely following the rules of the Elven Sword Dance to defeat your opponent. There is nothing wrong with that. His words elicited a reaction from Lotus. You're wrong. Lotus looked directly at Alice. If Versilia really went astray because she lost to me, then that's fine. But I reckon that if Versilia didn't even hesitate to get her hands on the spell engraving just to defeat me, then it must be because of my mistake 3 years ago. Mistake? The group of young ladies were perplexed. Only Noah remembered Lotus's words. 3 years ago, in order to fulfill my wish, I blindly defeated all the enemies in front of me. In the end, I didn't even remember their names, appearances, or even their identities. Lotus closed her eyes. 3 years ago, in my eyes, other than my own wish, there was nothing else, including Versilia. If there was a reason why she didn't hesitate to transplant the spell engraving, then it must be because of my disdain and contempt, right? This. The group of young ladies was speechless. So, if Versilia really did transplant the spell engraving, then I will personally end this grudge. Lotus opened her eyes and looked at the group of young ladies. Because of this, I returned here. As soon as she finished speaking, the entire room was filled with an oppressive atmosphere. Since Alice has decided to help, what about you all? Noah changed the topic as if he wanted to disperse the oppressive atmosphere. Claire, Linley, and Fianna, do you all plan to interfere? Claire, Linley, and Fianna pondered for a moment before looking up. Versilia is the strongest elf user in this academy. If we plan to enter the Elven Sword Dance Festival, we will have to deal with her sooner or later, Claire said hesitantly. In that case, it might be a good thing to get in touch with Versilia earlier. If there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask me. Lynn Silei smiled naturally. Helping people in trouble is the duty of nobles. As the eldest daughter of the Lorenfrost family, I can't just sit by and do nothing. I really want to help. Fianna's eyes flashed with uncertain emotions. In the end, a bitter expression appeared on her face. But, can I really help? Fianna's words startled everyone present. Including Noah. What did she mean by that? Only Lotus seemed to have thought of something and looked at Fianna. Good, I also think it's time to have a good talk with you. This time, it was Fianna's turn to be startled. Without giving Fianna a chance to react, Lotus stood up and said to everyone present. I'll leave Versilia's matter to you for now. As for Princess Fianna, I'll be borrowing her for now. After that, Lien picked up the helmet of invisibility and glanced at Noah. I'll be borrowing this helmet of invisibility for now. Leaving these words behind, Lotus reached out her hand and grabbed Fianna's hand, who was still in a daze. She then walked out of the room and disappeared from the scene. Claire, Linley, and Alice could only watch as Lotus swiftly took Fianna away. Noah watched as Lotus and Fianna left. After a while, he curled his lips and said. She really threw away this burden without hesitation. Although that was what he said, Noah could understand Lotus's actions. 3 years ago, Ren had a relationship with Fianna. Perhaps, compared to the people here, Lotus knew better about the treatment Fianna received after she became the lost elf concubine, and the reason why she refused to become one. In that case, it might be a good thing for Lotus to talk to Fianna alone. Since that's the case, we'll be in charge of confirming whether or not Versilia has the inscription. Noah looked at Claire's group of 3. Let's discuss what to do first. Claire, Linley, and Alice all nodded their heads heavily. However, at this moment, 2 panicked footsteps sounded from outside the door, attracting the attention of Noah and the others. Not long after, 2 elven messengers wearing the standard equipment of the Wind King Knight Legion appeared outside the door, panting heavily. They shouted at Alice. Commander. Not good. Lady Versilia went to the headquarters of the Wind King Knight Legion to poach people. Wah. What? Alice was speechless. Alessia Elven Academy, on a spacious road. With Alice in the lead, Noah, Claire, Linley, and the 2 members of the Wind King Knight Legion rushed forward at an extremely fast speed. Apart from Noah, Claire, and Linley, the others more or less had some anxiety on their faces. As the group of people ran, a temple-like building appeared in front of everyone's eyes. That was the headquarters of the Wind King Knight Legion. However, at this moment, the door of the headquarters of the Wind King Knight Legion was wide open. Noah, who had the best eyesight, could see it clearly. In the headquarters of the Wind King Knight Legion, a group of elves wearing the standard equipment of the Wind King Knight Legion were surrounding a person. It was a young girl wearing light armor that emphasized agility and a cape. Alice, who had rushed into the headquarters of the Wind King Knight Legion, stopped and shouted at the same time. "Sister!" His words were met with Versilia's cold glare. "You're too slow, Alice." Alice ignored Versilia's sarcasm and stared at Versilia. "Sister, what are you planning to do?" "What are you planning to do?" Versilia said emotionlessly. "Although it's a headache for me to have overly weak teammates, the Elven Sword Dance Festival requires a team of 5 people to participate, so I can't do anything about it. However, I also don't want to randomly gather a group of useless trash. For this reason, I need to poach people from the Wind King Knight Legion, a group that only elves with some ability can join. Do I need to explain such a clear situation to you?" Chapter 1003. Poach people. After hearing Versilia's words, not only did Alice's beautiful face sink completely, but the surrounding members of the Wind King Knights also exchanged glances with one another. From a practical point of view, Versilia's actions could be considered efficient. After all, just as Versilia said, because of the need to maintain law and order in the Elven Academy and even the Academy City, only Elven users with outstanding abilities could join the Wind King Knights. Elven users with no abilities could not join the Wind King Knights. From this point of view, Versilia poaching people from the Wind King Knights was indeed efficient. However, Versilia was planning to poach someone from Alice's territory. She wanted to poach people around her younger sister. Tisk. Claire was speechless in disgust. She actually caused such trouble for her younger sister. There really is such an elder sister in this world, oh? Versilia seemed to have heard Claire's words. She glanced at Claire and sneered. "I really hope you can say this to your elder sister, the sister of the elf concubine of Calamity." Claire was furious. Just as she was about to step forward, she was stopped by Linley. "You can even poach people so openly?" Linsley suddenly smiled. "It seems that you lost to the strongest sword dancer not only in terms of power, but also in terms of character." "Character?" Versilia looked at Linsley with a cold gaze. "That kind of thing is not worth mentioning in front of the strongest power." "Sister, are you serious about this?" Alice's face darkened. If a person only has power and no character, then how is he different from a thug? But if you don't have power, you can't even be a thug. Versilia's gaze became sharp and looked directly at Noah. Great power can attract and plunder everything. "Alice, didn't you gather around that male elven user because he has power comparable to run a subtle?" "Elder sister, you." Alice's expression changed abruptly. Versilia's words could not be said to be wrong. In the beginning, Alice only treated Noah as a heretic who could bring chaos to the academy and had always been wary of Noah as an uneasy factor. It was only until Noah saved Alice from the magical beasts with his outstanding strength and performed a wonderful sword dance with Ren that Alice began to change her view of Noah. However, Alice definitely did not gather around Noah because of his strength. As for why, from the very beginning, before Noah displayed his strength, Alice had already had a lot of contact with Noah, didn't she? In other words, strictly speaking, Versilia's words could be seen as slandering Alice. "You." Claire couldn't help but speak. "Is this how you think of your younger sister?" "I'm just stating the facts," Versilia said matter-of-factly. "Even if you're an elven messenger, your strength will be powerless in the face of powerful strength. If you think I'm wrong, then how about using strength to convince me?" After saying that, Versilia slowly raised a hand, and a shocking amount of divine might gathered in her hand. "The weak don't even have the right to speak. If you want me, the strong, to listen to you, at least try to withstand an attack of this level." When these words came out of Versilia's mouth, a sharp light flashed in her eyes. In an instant, the astonishing amount of divine power that had gathered in Versilia's hand was suddenly released. Wang! Under the support of the astonishing divine power, a substantial shockwave suddenly swept out in all directions like a violent gale, and without the slightest warning, the shockwave spread out. Dong! The violent shock wave shook the surroundings and caused the entire headquarters of the Wind King Knights to rumble. Ah! The Wind King Knights surrounding Versilia were blown away by the sudden shock wave before they could react. Amidst screams, they were like kites with a broken string, either crashing into walls or smashing into the ground, emitting bitter groans. In an instant, the entire headquarters of the Wind King Knights was filled with sand and dust, and the marble floor was completely shattered. With Versilia as the center, a large crater was blown out by the substantial shock wave. If there was an elven messenger with good eyesight, they would definitely be able to discover it. This substantial shockwave attack was shockingly an earth elemental elven magic. Versilia released such an astonishingly powerful earth attribute elven magic in a short instant without chanting an incantation. And it was this elven magic that didn't even chant an incantation that resulted in almost no one in the Wind King Knights that gathered the elites of the Elven Academy being able to dodge or block it. Versilia's strength could be seen at a glance. After an unknown amount of time, Versilia, who was standing in the center of the large crater, raised her brows and cast her gaze forward. In front of her, at the center of the dense sand and dust, Claire, Lindsley, and Alice raised their heads with palpitations. In front of the three girls, a figure appeared out of nowhere. With his back facing them, he extended a hand and pointed it in Versilia's direction. Although I knew that if it was you, you should be able to deal with this level of attack, but I didn't expect it to be so easy. Versilia narrowed her eyes. As expected of a sword dance expert who can compete with Renesubble. But, how did you block my elven magic? Versilia couldn't be blamed for having such doubts. This was because Noah, who stood in front of Claire, Lindsley, and Alice, didn't use any elven magic or elven equipment. He didn't even release any divine energy fluctuations. He just stood there and extended a hand in Versilia's direction. Just like that, the elven magic that attacked Noah disappeared without a trace the moment it touched Noah's outstretched hand. How could Versilia not be suspicious of this? Unfortunately, Noah didn't have the leisure to explain things to this person who had already been blinded by power. Thus, looking at Versilia's ice-cold expression, Noah said this sarcastically. Strength of the same weight is powerless in the face of great power. Didn't you say this? Versilia's gaze instantly turned cold. So you're saying that in your opinion, my strength is of the same weight? It's not to the extent of being of the same weight, Noah said with a calm expression. It's just that I've never felt that you were that strong, the strongest elven user in the academy. Noah's words finally made Versilia smile. That smile was colder than any of Versilia's previous expressions. Very good. Otherwise, it wouldn't be interesting. Versilia slowly walked forward, her gaze and expression terrifyingly cold. Since you've said so, then let me see if you have the ability to speak such arrogant words. In the next instant, a blinding light burst out from Versilia's body, accompanied by a wave of divine energy that surged out like a tide, spreading in all directions. Originally, I planned to settle this during the team competition, but now, it seems like I'll have to change my plans a little. From the dazzling light, Versilia's cold voice echoed. You're too much of an eyesore. Male elven user, disappear here. As soon as he finished speaking, the dazzling light gradually disappeared. A crimson fortress covered in composite mesh appeared before everyone's eyes, equipped with black cannons that suddenly pointed at Noah. Let's see how weak your strength is. Chapter 1004. Let's see how weak you are. When Versilia's cold and emotionless voice sounded from the crimson composite mecha, the chilling black cannons aimed at Noah exploded with flashes of light. Bang, 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 bang. Amidst the chaotic and loud sounds of cannon fire, scorching cannon fire shot out from the black cannons and transformed into flashes of light. Like meteorites rubbing against the atmosphere, they enveloped Noah. The barrage of cannon fire that enveloped Noah like a storm wasn't elven magic, but an attack from Versilia's elven device. Facing such a fierce barrage, even Noah wouldn't use his body to block it. Seeing the continuous barrage of cannon fire, Noah's figure trembled slightly and suddenly retreated. Bang! The rain-like cannon fire fell directly on the ground where Noah was originally standing. Instead of hitting Noah, they hit the ground and blasted the ground, setting off intense flames. Fortunately, before that, Claire, Linley, and Alice finally reacted and hurriedly retreated. Otherwise, the girls who were supposed to be behind Noah would have been hit by the cannons as well. In other words, Versilia didn't care about Claire, Linsley, or even her adopted sister Alice. She didn't show any mercy and launched an all-out barrage of cannon fire. At this moment, Versilia didn't care about Claire, Linsley, or Alice at all. Just like 3 years ago when she faced Lotus in the preliminary round of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Lotus didn't care about Versilia at all. "Did you dodge my cannon fire?" In the fortress covered by the crimson composite mecha, Versilia spoke indifferently. "Then try an undodgeable cannon fire." The black cannons equipped on the composite mech instantly pointed at the retreating Noah amidst the mechanical sounds. The cannons flashed like fireworks once again. Bang, 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 bang. Along with the sound of cannon fire, the cannons that were like real missiles shot directly in the direction of the retreating Noah. Their field of vision had long been covered by the earth-shattering cannon fire. However, Noah's footsteps didn't have the slightest bit of disorder. His figure flashed and dodged to the side. Whoosh! However, the missile-like bombardment directly changed direction in mid-air and continued to chase after Noah amidst the sharp sound of breaking through the air. Noah was a little surprised when he saw this. However, his footsteps were still as steady as before. He was as an agile monkey as he repeatedly moved on the ground. Each time, he was able to narrowly dodge the fierce cannon attack. Claire, Linsley, and Alice, who had retreated to the side, were all shocked when they saw Noah playing with the cannons. "No," Alice said anxiously. "If this continues, Noah will definitely be hit by Sister's cannons." While Alice was extremely anxious, Claire and Linsley, whose teamwork with Noah had improved by leaps and bounds during this period of time, realized something. No, Noah is deliberately not making a move. Claire was the first to realize Noah's intention. He wants to use this opportunity to test Versilia and find out if there are any traces of spell engraving on her body. No, not only that. Linsley realized Noah's other intention. Noah is deliberately stalling for time so that we can take care of the wounded around us. After hearing Linsley's words, Alice remembered that there were still members of the Wind King Knights who had been sent flying by Versilia's elven magic. At the same time, Noah, who was being chased by the cannons with tracking abilities, directly flashed out of the headquarters of the Wind King Knights and retreated outside, confirming Linsley's words. "Want to escape?" Versilia's cold voice sounded again. "I won't let you escape." Behind the fortress covered in a crimson composite mech, a jet of light burst out, causing the fortress that looked like a mechanical giant to float in the air. With a thrust, it flew out of the headquarters of the Wind King Knights amidst an ear-piercing sound. Alice almost wanted to chase after it out of reflex. However, before she could move, Claire and Linsley each grabbed one of Alice's hands. "Don't chase." Claire stared at Alice. "The difference in strength between us and those two is too great. Instead of chasing after them, it's better to hand Versilia over to Noah. Our mission is to take care of the wounded here and inform the academy while we're at it." Even Linsley analyzed calmly, which was rare for her. "Don't forget, you're also the commander of the Wind King Knights." Alice's expression became uncertain. After a while, she nodded unwillingly. "Shio!" Cannons that were like missiles suddenly flashed through the air, circling around the horizon, and immediately shot towards the retreating Noah. "Let's see how you're going to escape now." In the air, Versilia, who was covered by the crimson mechanical giant, let out a cold shout. Cannons were aimed at Noah below, causing circles of flashes. Amidst the chaotic sounds of cannons, fierce cannons rained down from the sky, pouring down on Noah below. There were countless missiles chasing after him. Above his head, there were fierce cannons pouring down like raindrops. This scene, no matter how one looked at it, there was no room for escape. However, Noah's expression was still calm. He didn't even look at the cannons raining down on him. Instead, he looked around. Without knowing when, Noah came to a very vast atrium. After leaving the headquarters of the Wind King Knights, Noah led Versilia all the way here. There weren't any students around. In here, Noah didn't have to worry about the consequences and showed some of his skills. Looking up at the Crimson Fortress hovering in midair, a glint flashed in Noah's eyes. A short sword suddenly appeared in his hand. "Please, Aster." As if in response to Noah's voice, Aster's young and clear voice sounded in Noah's mind. "I'm your sword, everything is as you wish." A steady stream of divine might energy suddenly poured into the small steel sword from Noah's hand. Clank! Dazzling white light burst out from the short sword that Aster had transformed into and gradually stretched out. Finally, it turned into a silver holy sword shining with silver light. Shio! The pursuing missiles and cannons raining down on Noah instantly surrounded him from all directions and mercilessly fell on him. However, the moment the cannons landed on Noah's body, the brilliant light on the holy sword in Noah's hand suddenly soared to the extreme. Absolute sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. The holy sword that was blooming with brilliant white light suddenly turned into a ray of moonlight. Like a round moon that suddenly appeared, with Noah as the center, it drew a perfect arc in the air. Clank! Amidst the resounding sword hum, the fierce bombardment that came from all directions was neatly cut in half by the moon-like sword light, exploding into pieces. Bang! Scorching flames surged up. What? Versilia, who clearly saw Noah's sword shatter all the cannons, exclaimed in shock. However, at this moment, the flames below suddenly twisted. A black shadow shot out from the flames and rushed into the sky. Like a bolt of lightning, it shot towards the Crimson Fortress that was suspended in midair. That's... Versilia's pupils shrank. Versilia couldn't be more familiar with this move. This was because 3 years ago, during the preliminary round of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Versilia had been defeated by the strongest sword dancer at the start of the competition. This sword was called Absolute Sword Skill. Form 1 Purple Lightning. Like a bolt of lightning, it shot directly into the sky. With a terrifying speed that even Versilia couldn't dodge in time, it instantly arrived in front of the Crimson Mech. Chapter 1005. Like a flash of lightning, the spikes blasted towards the Crimson Fortress, which couldn't evade in time and was akin to a mechanical giant. Clang! When the crisp sound of metal clashing rang out in the air, and dazzling sparks exploded in the air, a burst of powerful shockwaves spread out from the point of collision, spreading in all directions. After stabbing Versilia with violet lightning, Noah's figure slowly floated down from the sky. Following the gravity, he steadily landed on the ground. On the other hand, the mechanical giant-like dark red fortress was directly hit and fell from the air. Like a kite with a broken string, it fiercely smashed to the ground, stirring up a burst of sand and gravel. Obviously, Versilia did not miss out on the attack just now and took it all. Even if in the eyes of others, Noah's attack was simply like a small human challenging a giant that covered the sky and gave people a feeling of overestimation, in fact, Noah's strength was superior. In terms of sword dance, Noah, who had learned the absolute sword skill, which was known as the strongest sword dance in the world, was naturally not weaker than Versilia. In terms of elves, although Versilia had also formed a contract with a sealed elf, Noah's Aster was not only the highest level elf, but also the strongest existence among sword elves. In addition, Noah also had a LV4 ability that the elves in this world could not have. With the blessing of LV4, he could already match the physical strength of Hercules in this world in the form of a servant. Naturally, Noah was much stronger than Versilia. Versilia was unable to dodge this attack and took it head-on. It was natural for her to end up like this. Holding the highest level elven equipment, the holy sword, Noah looked ahead, looking into the thick sand and dust. Come out, I should have shown mercy in that attack just now. The sand and dust in the air stagnated for a moment, then suddenly shook open, revealing the compound dark red fortress standing on the ground. Taking a closer look, there was a shocking mark on the chest of the compound dark red fortress that looked like a mechanical giant. However, this mark not only did not make the dark red giant look embarrassed, but it also made a fierce aura pervade its body. 3 years ago, I was defeated by this move. Who would have thought that 3 years later, I would actually experience this move again under such circumstances? The rumors are indeed true. You and Liena Subble have the exact same sword dance technique, and the power you display is definitely not below her 3 years ago. Versilia's indifferent voice was full of anger. However, I don't need you to show mercy. Versilia's elven device vibrated violently, causing the crimson mecha giant to swell up a lot. You have the same sword dance skill as Liena Subble, and your strength is no less than Liena Subble's 3 years ago. As long as I can defeat you, I can defeat Liena Subble. Versilia's voice echoed in the surroundings. I'm no longer the same as 3 years ago. I won't be defeated by Liena Subble's sword dance. Give it your all, Noah Doria. At this moment, Versilia finally stopped addressing Noah as a male elven user. This also meant that Versilia was finally getting serious. I'll defeat you. I must defeat you. Noah didn't know if it was an illusion. Noah felt that Versilia's voice seemed to be a little crazy. If I don't do this, then it's meaningless. The godly might energy surging around the crimson mecha giant increased exponentially, causing the crimson mecha giant's ruthless aura to become more and more berserk. Then, 2 sharp spikes suddenly popped out from the dark red giant's shoulders and madly rotated like a drill. Pung! A burst of red light vibrated from the back of Versilia's elven equipment and turned into a complete propulsion force, making the dark red giant look like a charging tank, madly rushing towards Noah. Suddenly, wherever the dark red giant went, the stone tiles on the ground would shatter, revealing the soil. The pair of madly rotating sharp spikes carried blazing heat, causing the surrounding space to distort slightly. It ruthlessly pierced towards Noah. Looking at the dark red giant charging towards him, Noah's eyes flashed, and the holy sword in his hand shook, bringing a burst of bright light. Boom! In the next instant, the bright holy sword and the blazing sharp spikes fiercely collided, causing a shocking shock wave, and a thunderous explosion resounded through the sky. A violent divine power energy fluctuation mixed with a violent impact burst out from the center of the impact, shaking the entire area. Gee! And in the center of the impact, Noah was confronting the dark red giant that was 2 or 3 times taller than him. The holy sword in his hand surged with a bright white light, fiercely rubbing against the sharp spikes that fell heavily on the sword, bursting out bursts of sparks and impact, causing the ground to begin to crack. This confrontation didn't last long. Crack! At some point, a cracking sound rang out from the crimson mecha giant's body. That was the sound of the sharp spikes falling on the holy sword cracking. Versilia's expression changed. Sorry, my Aster is the strongest sword spirit. Even if King Solomon's 72 pillar spirits were added together, they wouldn't be enough. Through the bursting sparks and impact, Noah sneered. Not to mention your seal spirit. As soon as his voice fell, Noah instilled even more violent divine power into the holy sword. In an instant, Noah and Aster's divine power converged on the body of the shining holy sword. Along with the soaring radiance, it transformed into a substantial impact that shook the body of the crimson mecha giant. Boom! In the loud muffled sound, the dark red giant was directly shaken back. Its heavy footsteps landed on the ground, and each step crushed the stone tiles on the ground. It didn't stop until it retreated a distance of more than 10 steps. Goo, woo, within the dark red giant, Versilia's depressed voice came out. Even Versilia, who was in her mecha-like elven device, was injured by the shockwave. What's wrong? Noah raised the holy sword in his hand and pointed it at Versilia, mocking her. This is your power? No wonder Liena Subble could effortlessly defeat you. After saying that, Noah didn't give Versilia a chance to react. His feet moved, and his body shot out like an arrow leaving the bowstring. In a flash, he appeared in front of Versilia, who was covered by the dark red giant. The holy sword in his hand swung in a terrifying arc, mixed with the terrifying sound of wind breaking, and mercilessly slashed at Versilia. It seemed that Versilia still hadn't recovered from the previous blow. The operation of her divine power began to slow and stagnate. In addition to the previous lesson, facing Noah's merciless attack, she no longer dared to meet him head-on. At that moment, Versilia could only try her best to control her elven magic device. The heavy mecha giant hurriedly flashed and dodged the holy sword in a wretched manner. Who? Almost at the same time, Noah suddenly turned around and suddenly kicked in the direction of Versilia, who was dodging in a pitiful manner. Dodging Noah's previous attack had already exhausted Versilia's mental and physical strength. Now, she naturally couldn't dodge this sudden kick. She could only watch as the whip-like kick heavily bombarded the dark red giant's chest. Bang! In a heart-wrenching sound, the dark red giant, who was 2 to 3 times taller than Noah, was directly kicked away. Chapter 1006. Bang! The attack carried a terrifying force and directly exploded on the chest of Versilia's magic mecha armor, causing a heart-wrenching sound and a shockwave. Bang! Under the direct impact of the terrifying power, the chest armor of the Crimson Giant, which was covered in a thick composite mech, was blasted apart, turning into fragments that scattered on the ground. Versilia only felt a powerful shockwave that shook her body. Then, she completely lost her ability to resist. Like a rubber ball that was kicked away, she flew backward along with the heavy armor and crashed to the ground with a sharp gust of wind. Thick sand and dust rose from the center of the heavy mecha armor like smoke. The ground that was directly hit by the crimson mecha armor cracked inch by inch and scraped out a layer of soil. Cough cough, lying on the ground, Versilia violently coughed a few times and tightly clenched her teeth. Damn, because the breastplate of the elf magic mech had been destroyed by Noah's kick, Versilia who was lying inside the mech was also revealed. Versilia didn't care about this at all. She endured the severe pain and raised her head with difficulty. In front of Versilia's eyes, Noah who was holding the demon slayer slowly walked towards Versilia with powerful steps. Because the divine power surging around Noah was too dense, it was like a layer of phosphorescent light film that covered Noah's body. As for the demon slayer in Noah's hand, it was still emitting a dazzling light due to the fact that it had been infused with a sufficient amount of divine power. At this time, Versilia felt a suffocating pressure from the man in front of her. This kind of suffocating pressure, Versilia had only felt it from 2 people so far. One was called the strongest sword dancer by the world, Lotus. The other was called the strongest elf user by the world, Grey Vaz. Noah was the third person. This also proved that Noah was an existence that could be compared to the first 2. In fact, it might even be above that. Versilia could feel the terrifying pressure emanating from Noah's body. Recalling that Noah had used the same ultimate sword technique as Lotus, she felt a dark emotion welling up in her heart. Could it be that she was defeated by that sword dance again without any power to fight back? No. No, Versilia used her terrifying willpower to support her body. She controlled the broken mecha and stood up shakily. I have become stronger. Compared to 3 years ago, Versilia had indeed become stronger. And a lot stronger. After all, 3 years ago, Versilia was defeated by Lotus's ultimate sword technique in 1 strike. Today, although Noah did not take long to defeat Versilia, and the whole process did not take more than 5 strikes, it was still much better than being defeated in 1 strike. However, Versilia remembered it clearly. At the beginning, if Noah had not deliberately held back, then, with the initial form of the ultimate sword technique called Purple Lightning, Versilia might have been defeated by the same strike, at the same moment, under the same circumstances. How could Versilia let go of this? In order to defeat Lotus, I sacrificed so much. Versilia stared at Noah. How can I lose before I even meet Renasubble? 3 years ago, the battle with Lotus completely changed Versilia's life. Until that day, Versilia had always boasted of being the strongest knight and was full of confidence in herself. That was to be expected. As a descendant of a lower noble family that declined after the Lombard War, Versilia not only relied on her excellent elven trainer to tame the sealed spirits that normal elven trainers could not touch, but she was also adopted by the military rulers of the Kingdom of Osea, the Duke of Frangelto's family. At the age of 15, she stepped onto the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival and obtained the qualifications to be one of the 12 knights. In the entire kingdom, how many people could achieve such a result? They could probably be counted on one hand, right? Thus, Versilia carried this confidence and stepped onto the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, vowing to become the champion of the festival. However, this confidence was crushed in the first match of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Lotus was not only younger than Versilia at that time, she was also a newcomer with no reputation. In the end, facing such an opponent, Versilia still lost even after using all her strength. At that time, Versilia still had not buried her obsession with Lotus. Because compared to the spectators who were captivated by Lotus's beautiful sword dance, Versilia, who was in close contact with Lotus's sword dance, felt a stronger sense of longing and respect for her than the average person. In other words, like Claire, Linley, and Alice, Versilia was also captivated by Lotus' sword dance. However, with such longing and respect, Versilia saw the eyes of the strongest sword dancer girl. In the girl's deep eyes, there was no enmity towards Versilia, nor was there any pity for her. There was no trace of disdain for this weak opponent. Instead, there was no feeling at all. In the eyes of the strongest sword dancer, Versilia did not exist at all. From that moment on, Versilia was captivated by her obsession. She had to make the strongest sword dancer acknowledge her. For this, she would do anything. Even if it was the power of something dirty in the past, it was the same. Can't lose. Versilia controlled the wobbly mecha giant and stumbled in front of Noah. She struggled to reach out her armored arm and grabbed Noah's collar. Only you, who possess a sword dance that even moves my heart, can absolutely not lose. Noah did not resist and let Versilia grab his collar. He looked at Versilia with pity in his eyes. It's time for you to wake up. Noah reached out and tightly grabbed the armored arm that was grabbing his collar. He slowly pried it away, but his eyes did not leave Versilia's pale face. Because of your obsession, you pursue power, but because of your obsession, you neglect everything else and become a captive of power. What is the meaning of your life like this? You're saying that this is meaningless? Versilia glared at Noah. What do you understand? What do you know? That's right. I don't understand what you're thinking. Noah glanced at Versilia. But I know that if you just want Liana Subble to acknowledge you, then you can't do it now. You. Versilia's pretty face twisted in agitation. At this moment, Versilia's face froze. Go. Without any warning, Versilia suddenly grabbed her heart and laid on the ground. Her face was filled with extreme pain. The sudden pain caused Versilia's tattered elven magic armor to explode and disappear into the air. The divine might around her went berserk and began to become chaotic. Ugh. Ah. Not long after, Versilia clutched her heart and screamed in pain. Seeing this, Noah frowned. What's wrong with you? Ignoring Noah, Versilia endured the pain, propped herself up, and rushed into the bushes. Noah's frown deepened. Just as he was about to chase after her, chaotic footsteps sounded in the distance. Noah. Claire, Linley, and Alice brought many people and rushed in the direction of Noah. Noah could only look in the direction where Versilia disappeared. His eyes began to show some thoughts. Chapter 1007. In Alicia Elven Academy, students were prohibited from fighting among themselves. Whether it was Noah or Versilia, they were the most famous people in Alicia Elven Academy. Therefore, the conflict between Noah and Versilia, and the fact that they started a fight in the academy, caused a huge uproar in no time and spread throughout the entire academy. As the dean, Gray and Vath were the first to receive the news. Originally, as long as the Wind King Knights set out, they would be able to solve this kind of private fight immediately. However, this time, the two parties involved in the fight were not people that the Zephyr Knights could stop. Therefore, as expected, Noah was called to the office by Gray and Vath almost immediately. What's going on? Gray and Vath crossed her arms in front of her chest and stared at Noah, who was standing in front of the desk. Although there was no dissatisfaction in her tone, it was full of doubts. Why did you suddenly start a fight with Versilia in the academy? Gray and Vath believed that she had a good eye for people. Gray and Vath could see that although Noah could not be said to be a well-behaved person, if no one provoked him, he would not do anything that gave others a headache. Otherwise, with Noah's strength, the Alicia Elven Academy would have been turned upside down by him. Basically, as long as nothing happened, Noah would never take the initiative to cause trouble. Therefore, even Gray and Vath were very surprised by Noah's sudden conflict with Versilia. In this regard, Noah just shook his head. Don't look at me. Although I want to accompany you to the end, the main problem is still with Versilia. As for the reason, you should be able to guess it, right? You're trying to shirk all responsibility, aren't you? Gravath pushed up the small glasses on her face and said. It's Liena Subble, right? Noah nodded, which made Gray and Vath sigh. As expected, Versilia has her eyes on you. Gray and Vath naturally knew about Versilia's obsession with Lien. When they received the news that Versilia had rushed back to the academy overnight because of Lien, Gray and Vath had already expected it. Noah's relationship with Lien would definitely make Versilia target Noah. Today's conflict was actually within Gray and Vath's expectations. However, Gray and Vath did not expect this conflict to come so quickly. Of course, as Noah said, although most of the reasons for his conflict with Versilia were because of Versilia, it was also because Noah was willing to accompany him to the end. Otherwise, Noah would not have openly provoked Versilia in the Wind King Knights. Let me make it clear first. The commotion caused by you and Versilia is enough for the academy to punish you, Gray and Vath said with some displeasure. If I didn't step in to suppress it, you and Versilia's ranking points might have been deducted. Noah shrugged with a do whatever you want look, which made Gray and Vath even more displeased. Forget it. Both you and Versilia will be the trump cards of the Osea Empire in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Everyone will choose to turn a blind eye to your personal conflict. Gray and Vath glanced at Noah. However, before the Elven Sword Dance Festival starts, it's best not to cause any more trouble. The academy is already chaotic enough. What's wrong? Noah sharply sensed that something was wrong from Gray and Vath's words. Did something else happen in the academy? To be precise, something happened in the academy city. Gray and Vath snorted. Recently, some shady rats seem to have snuck into the academy city. You should understand if they say it's the Skeleton Alliance. Hearing Gray and Vath's words, Noah's mind couldn't help but become active. The Skeleton Alliance. Noah had only heard this term from Lotus recently. The Skeleton Alliance was originally an underground organization that specialized in doing shady business. Now that the Elven Sword Dance Festival was about to start, this underground organization would definitely take this opportunity to contact many elves who wanted to participate in the festival but were unable to do so. For example, they would induce the elves who wanted to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival to undergo the transplanting of spells and engravings. Sneaking into the academy city of the Alicia Elven Academy was probably for this purpose. However, Lotus had also said that Versilia had contacted the Skeleton Alliance before. When Versilia rushed back to the academy, the Skeleton Alliance had snuck into the academy city again? Was there a connection between the two? After coming out of the dean's office, Noah went directly to the Crow class dormitory and returned to Linslay's room. As soon as he opened the door, Noah saw Claire and Linsley. Even Lotus was there. Claire and Linsley stood up at the same time and looked at Noah. How is it? Claire asked anxiously. The dean doesn't plan to punish you, right? Although strictly speaking, it was that fortress girl who attacked you first and you could only be considered self-defense. There are many higher-ups in the academy who have expectations for Versilia. Lindsley raised her beautiful eyebrows. If I don't handle this well, my team's ranking might be lowered and even disqualified from the Elven Sword Dance Festival, right? It's not as serious as you think. Noah couldn't help but laugh. Gray and Vath also want to see me appear in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. They won't let me be disqualified. After saying this, Noah looked around and then looked at Claire. Where's Alice? She's in the Night Corps, Claire said. Alice is dealing with such a big matter in the Night Corps. Then what about Faena? Noah looked at Lotus and asked in confusion. Didn't you take Faena away? I'll have Lestia accompany her. Lotus gave a concise explanation. There are some problems with the princess contract. After saying this, Lotus didn't explain further. However, Noah, Claire, and Lindsley all understood what Lotus meant. Perhaps the princess contract was the root cause of Faena becoming a lost elven concubine. Lotus seemed to have known about this long ago, so she wanted to help Faena. I heard you had a conflict with Versilia Eva. Lotus looked straight at Noah and asked. What? Did you find anything? Although there were all kinds of effects of incantations, they were still artificial spells that affected elves. If Versilia really did transplant the incantations, then they might be able to find something during battle. With this goal in mind, coupled with Versilia's arrogance, Noah deliberately stood out to provoke and test Versilia. Versilia is indeed a bit strange. Noah touched his chin and said. Although it's a bit strange for me to say this, Versilia's divine might seems to be a bit abnormal. Generally speaking, the higher the level and power of the elven device, the more divine might it would consume when using it. Versilia's elves were sealed elves, and the power of the elven device was even greater. After a round of bombardment, even the strongest building wouldn't be able to withstand 2 to 3 seconds of bombardment. With such a powerful elven device, just using it would consume a lot of divine might. From Noah's point of view, ordinary elves would have to lie down after using Versilia's elven device for less than 30 seconds. However, Versilia continued to use the elven magic device without restraint. Even during the battle, the divine aura didn't show any signs of depletion. For an elven user, this was indeed a bit abnormal. I don't know how much Versilia's god's aura is left, but during the fight with me, Versilia's god's aura was at its peak. There was no sign of it being drained. Noah recalled Versilia's abnormal behavior. Also, in the end, something seemed to have happened to Versilia's body. She seemed to be in great pain. Pain? Lotus's brows furrowed. Chapter 1008. The two suspicious points that Noah had discovered might prove that Versilia had transplanted the rune seal into her body. After all, just like what Noah said, it was impossible for Versilia's divine aura to not consume a large amount of energy while using the elven equipment of that level. Under such circumstances, not only did Versilia use the elven device without restraint, but her divine aura was also at its peak. That was a little abnormal. Not everyone could be like Noah, who had an energy source that could store unlimited amounts of energy. However, if Versilia had implanted a rune that could greatly amplify the effects of divine might, then this matter would become possible. Of course, this couldn't directly prove that Versilia had transplanted the rune. But as a point of suspicion, it was enough. Secondly, the abnormality of Versilia's body that Noah mentioned at the end was also a little suspicious. One had to know that transplanting the rune wasn't without a price. This thing was similar to Aster, which could be said to be exchanging one's life in exchange for great power. During the Lambard War, the existence of the rune had caused countless elves to die from the horrifying side effects. It was very inhumane. If Versilia had really transplanted the rune, then bearing the side effects of the rune would naturally cause abnormalities in her body. These 2 points were enough to prove that Versilia was the one who had transplanted the incantation into her body. In addition, Versilia had been in contact with the people of the Skeleton Alliance before. No one would believe that Versilia had transplanted the spell seal on herself. Lotus lowered her head, the light in her eyes flickering. After a while, she raised her head and looked at Noah. In other words, you also think that Versilia might have transplanted the rune? At most, it is only a possibility, Noah said straightforwardly. My position is only to assist you. Now, I have told you my judgment. It is up to you to decide how to deal with Versilia's matter. Lien nodded nonchalantly and turned around to look out the window. Sensing that Lotus' mood had been affected, Claire and Linley both chose to remain silent, giving Lotus precious quiet time. Looking at Lotus with her back facing him, Noah nodded in his heart. This girl's life had changed because of the world fragment. Not only did she inherit the power of the Dark Elf King that she shouldn't have inherited, she was also raised as an assassination tool by the Academy when she was young. Noah had heard of it before. When the Institute of Education nurtured assassins, the first thing they did was to erase the assassins' will and emotions, annihilate their humanity, and turn them into mere tools. After coming out from such a place, not only did Lotus not lose her humanity, but she even wanted to settle things with Versilia for her past mistakes. This was enough to prove that Lotus had a good heart. However, if Versilia really transplanted the incantation because of Lotus, then Noah really couldn't intervene. No, it should be said that he couldn't interfere. This was something that was destined to be solved by Lotus herself. All Noah could do was to help. Help this girl whose life and fate had been changed by the world fragment, and who had a faint relationship with him. It had been about 20 days since he came to this world. In another 10 days or so, Noah's authority would also be released. Although there was no opponent that required Noah to use his authority to deal with, it was still better to be able to use all of his power. Not long after, the curtain of night quietly fell. During the day, the elven forest was filled with a holy and lively aura. But at night, the elven forest would become a gloomy ghost land, with vile elves everywhere. It was very dangerous. But at this time, Versilia was running in the elven forest that was shrouded in darkness. Ha! Goo! One of his hands clutched his heart tightly, as if he was trying to pull it out of his chest, and he kept exerting force. As Versilia staggered forward, her expression was distorted by the intense pain from her heart. If someone could hear Versilia's heartbeat, they would be surprised to find that Versilia's heartbeat was abnormally fast. Her heart was beating wildly. It was this beating heart that brought indescribable pain to Versilia. Goo! Ugh! Versilia wanted to suppress the pain, but she was tormented by the pain and could only groan in pain. Versilia originally thought that she had already gotten used to this heart. But now, it seemed that Versilia wasn't completely used to this heart. It was just that the heart had been hiding for a long time, as if it was looking for a moment of exhaustion. Now, after being defeated by Noah, Versilia, whose body and mind had suffered a blow, welcomed the eruption of the hidden danger in her body. An uncontrollable pain and impulse surged in her body. It was a pitch-black impulse that wanted to lead Versilia's soul to depravity. This impulse made Versilia want to destroy everything in front of her, but she forcefully suppressed it with her last bit of willpower. I can't. Versilia suppressed the dark emotions in her heart and the impulse to destroy everything. Her face was pale as she clenched her teeth and persevered. I can't lose here. With the last shred of determination, Versilia moved forward again, trying her best to move forward. Her vision was blurry due to the intense pain. Her body and mind were under an unimaginable burden. However, Versilia still squeezed out the last bit of her will and staggered forward. Until a flirtatious laughter came from Versilia's surroundings. Seems like you're almost at your limit. Hearing this voice, Versilia stopped in her tracks and looked at the bushes beside her. Finally willing to show yourself? After hearing Versilia's words, the seductive voice came again. What? Are you looking for me? In the bushes, a figure quietly appeared. It was a woman with long, wavy emerald hair and a tall, slim figure. She looked extremely seductive. The woman was around 20 to 30 years old. Her ears were pointy, just like the elves that Noah saw in the world of Looking for a Chance encounter in the dungeon. Of course, the woman was not an elf in the world of Looking for a Chance encounter in the dungeon. However, she had a close relationship with the elves in this world. It was said that in the ancient mythological era, there was a demi-human race that came from the elemental realm to the human world. Their unique feature was their long pointy ears. This demi-human race was called the Elfie race. The woman was from the Elfie race. Other than that, the woman had another identity. Vivian Melosa. Versilia endured the intense pain in her heart and stared at the Elfie race named Vivian. Cunning merchant of the Skeleton Alliance, you really came to Elven Academy. Vivian Melosa was a merchant of the Skeleton Alliance that specialized in selling spell engravings. However, being a merchant was at most Vivian's side job. Vivian's real job was to study spell engravings. In the past, not only did she work as a lecturer in the Imperial Research Institute of the Austrian Empire, she was also a pioneer in spell engravings. Due to the end of the Lambar War, spell engravings were banned and Vivian was chased out of the research institute. After that, she wandered around various organizations and continued to study spell engravings without sleep or rest. In the end, she joined the Skeleton Alliance. To Vivian, who specialized in researching runes, Aletheia Elven Academy, a place where the best magi of the Empire gathered, was undoubtedly the best laboratory. Here, not only could Vivian easily find those witch priests who thirsted for power and came from prestigious families, she could sell their spell armor engravings and obtain research funds. She could also observe the elves who had transplanted their spell armor engravings to obtain research materials and continue to improve her own creations. Versilia was one of Vivian's customers. At the same time, she was Vivian's guinea pig. Chapter 1009. In the Dark Elf Forest, a merchant from the Skeleton Alliance carefully observed Versilia. Versilia was holding onto the trunk of a tree with one hand and clutching her heart with the other. Her face was pale, and her body was covered in sweat. Versilia looked very weak. She didn't even try to hide her pity. You really have reached your limit. I thought you would be able to get used to the rune engraving in the heart. What a pity. Although the rune engraving had powerful side effects, if the recipient was very adaptable to the rune engraving, then the side effects would be minimized. In the past, some of the elves who received the rune engraving in the Lambar War died within 1 or 2 hours after the engraving. Some survived for several years until the end of the Lambar War. The rune engraving in the heart was the most powerful and most dangerous rune engraving. Once the engraving was successful, the recipient's power would receive an astonishing boost. The boost would be much greater than other engraving recipients. Take Versilia for example. The effect of the rune engraving in her heart was that it could provide Versilia with endless divine might energy. It was because of this that Versilia could use her elven rune engraving without restraint. It was like a truly limitless fortress, displaying terrifying destructive power. Of course, Versilia's divine might energy wasn't truly limitless. Unlike Noah, who could store energy without any limit, Versilia's divine might energy could only be maintained at its peak state. After that, it could no longer receive more divine might energy. For example, if Versilia's divine aura was 100, then the 100 points of divine aura would be buffed by the spell engraving and maintained at 100 points. As for Noah, if his divine might energy was expressed as a value, then who knew how many zeros would be added to it? Moreover, it would continue to increase. However, even if it couldn't compare to Noah, the effect of Versilia's rune engraving was still very shocking. This was the powerful effect of the rune engraving in the heart. But at the same time, the side effects of the rune engraving in the heart were also frighteningly high. At least, apart from one person, Vivian had never seen an elf with a rune engraving in their heart live for long. Now, it seemed that Versilia had almost reached her limit after being defeated by Noah. Shut up. Versilia was still resisting the pain from her heart. Even though her face was pale, her eyes were still frighteningly cold. Skeleton Alliance merchant, I need more power. You should be able to give it to me, right? What did you say? Vivian's eyes widened slightly. You mean, I need rune engraving, more runes. Versilia's stubborn voice. Versilia. Hearing this, the flirtatious smile on Vivian's face slowly disappeared and turned into disbelief. Versilia, a single rune engraving in her heart was already pushing Versilia to her limit. If more runes were engraved in her body, the terrifying side effects would definitely make Versilia die in pain and despair. Versilia was naturally aware of this. However, Versilia couldn't care less about that. You just have to do as I say. Versilia clutched her heart with shocking strength. Even though her face was filled with pain, her eyes were still filled with terrifying stubbornness and unwillingness. I can't win against that man. Then I can't win against that sword dancer. I don't want to be defeated by that sword dance without being able to retaliate. But this level of power isn't enough. It's not enough. At this moment, Versilia seemed to be emitting pitch-black emotions all over her body as she uttered words of darkness. I will have the power to defeat Noah Duria, he said. I need the power to defeat Renasubal. I must defeat them. Seeing Versilia's unwillingness and stubbornness, Versilia spoke out in pity. But, one rune engraving is already pushing you to your limit. Even one more rune engraving will make you die instantly. I won't die. Versilia said in a tone that was unclear whether she was in a delirious state or determined state of mind. Before I defeat those two, I won't die. Hearing this, Versilia endured the pain. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness and stubbornness. After a while, Versilia smiled. Forget it. You're already at your limit. If I continue to observe you like this, I won't get any better data. I'll do as you wish. But, you should know that the cost of engraving a rune engraving isn't cheap at all. Just as Versilia finished speaking, a small object was thrown to Versilia. Versilia was startled and subconsciously caught it. Versilia opened her hand and looked at the object in her hand. She was shocked. Lying in Versilia's hand was a magatama that looked like a deep red gemstone. This is... Versilia exclaimed in surprise. The blood of the Elven King? Sealed in it is the power of the Elven King who can control a large number of elves, Versilia said coldly. Although I took it from an insignificant person, the blood of the Elven King is undoubtedly a national treasure. This thing should be worth enough, right? Hee hee. Vivian chuckled in delight. I didn't expect that you would actually have the blood of the Elf King. This is a national treasure that even the majority of the royal family is unable to obtain. If I were to sell it, I would be able to obtain a sufficient amount of research funds to squander. In other words, Versilia agreed to Versilia's deal. Versilia snorted coldly and turned her head away. She looked in the direction of the Elven Academy. It was as if she could see the figure of the only male elven user who once swung the sword that moved her heart. The hand that clutched her heart tightened. I will definitely defeat you. The next day, Noah and Linley had just gotten out of bed when someone knocked on the door. It was Alice who knocked on the door. Alice had a worried look on her face. As soon as she entered the room, Alice brought a piece of news. Versilia didn't come back last night? Linley asked in surprise. Why? I don't know. Alice's face was full of worry. The dean wanted to warn Sister Versilia about the conflict yesterday, but since yesterday, no one has been able to find Sister Versilia. Only a few students said that they vaguely saw Sister Versilia leave the academy and enter the Elven Forest. After that, there was no news of Sister Versilia. Could it be that the fortress girl took things too hard? Linley looked at Noah with uncertainty. Even you don't know where the fortress girl went? How would I know where Versilia went? Noah shrugged. My mission was only to confirm if Versilia had the inscription of the transplanting spell. I'm not her nanny. That's what the strongest sword dancer should do. Otherwise, I wouldn't have watched her leave yesterday. But I don't know where Sister Versilia went, Alice said worriedly. You said it yesterday. Sister Versilia's body seems to be abnormal. If she encounters any more danger, hearing Alice's words, Noah sighed inwardly. To be honest, Versilia's relationship with Noah was not only bad, but also very bad. If it wasn't for Lotus's request, Noah wouldn't even care about Versilia. However, Versilia was Alice's adopted sister. Noah didn't care about Versilia, but it didn't mean that Alice didn't care about Versilia. Just as Noah was about to say something to Alice, an accident happened. Kaboom! A shocking explosion shook the dormitory and entered the ears of Noah and the others. Noah and the others were shocked. Chapter 10:10. Rumble. The sound of the explosion was like a wave of sound that swept through the entire space and resounded throughout the sky of the Elven Academy. Noah, Alice, and Linley rushed out of the Crow dormitory and arrived at the courtyard in front of the dormitory. They raised their eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. Far in the distance, in a corner of the elven forest that surrounded the academy, a thick cloud of fire and dust rose into the sky like a mushroom cloud. There, the forest had long been covered in flames, and the fire was gradually spreading to the surroundings, gradually expanding the intensity of the fire. Fire? Alice said in shock. How could the elven forest be on fire? The elven forest was where the elves from the elemental elves lived. That forest was a rare and comfortable place for the elves in the human world. Therefore, even the fire elves would restrain themselves and not let the elven forest catch fire. In addition, there were many water elves in the elven forest. With those elves there, the elven forest couldn't possibly catch fire. At least, neither Alice nor Linley had ever seen the elven forest on fire. Unless someone deliberately set it on fire. What's going on? Look! The elven forest is on fire. The elven forest is on fire? How can this be? The students living in the dormitory of the Crow class seemed to be alarmed as well. They either poked their heads out of the windows of their rooms or, like Noah and the others, came out of the door. When they saw the elven forest on fire, they all began to clamor loudly. Claire was also one of the people who came out of the dormitory. What's going on? Claire didn't even have time to tie up her hair, letting it hang behind her back as she rushed out of the dormitory. When she saw the fire in the elven forest in the distance, she also stood up in shock. Why is the elven forest on fire? Who knows? Linley didn't forget to cause trouble for Claire even at this time. Don't tell me it's because you set it on fire? Who started a fire randomly? Claire glared at Linley angrily. Besides, I'm right here. Why would I set it on fire? Maybe your fire cat ran into the elven forest? Of course not. Scarlet was a good boy. Do you think I'm as unruly as your big dog? Fenrir is a proud white wolf. Not a dog. Furthermore, he had a very good upbringing. Unlike you, an unruly stray cat. What did you say? All right. Stop arguing. Alice yelled in annoyance. Why are you still arguing at a time like this? Noah didn't care about the noise that lingered in his ears. He gazed in the direction of the elven forest and spoke in a deep voice. This is bad. Claire, Linley, and Alice all heard Noah's voice, and their hearts immediately skipped a beat. Have you forgotten? Noah looked at Claire, Linley, and Alice. Ren and Fayanna are both in the elf forest. Claire, Linley, and Alice finally remembered this matter, and immediately stood up in shock. Alice, Noah said decisively. You know how to use flying magic, right? Bring us all over. Okay. Alice agreed without any hesitation. However, as Noah's teammates, Claire and Linley had some understanding of Noah's physique that was resistant to foul curses. We don't have a problem. We can directly support Alice's elven magic, Claire said doubtfully. But your physique can't support elven magic. How are you going to go with us? Noah didn't say anything. Instead, he reached out and grabbed Alice's small hand. Ah! Alice cried out in surprise. When she realized what had happened, her pretty face immediately turned red and she cried out in panic. You! What are you doing? I'd like to ask you what you're doing. Noah was speechless. My body can't support elven magic. So, Alice, bring me over. Ugh. Ugh. Alice forced herself to calm down, but her hand in Noah's hand was trembling. She was obviously very nervous. Noah didn't want to say anything more to this exceptionally pure reaction. He could only urge her. Hurry up. I know. Alice suppressed her shyness and closed her eyes. Wind, grant me protection. After chanting the elven magic incantation, a gentle breeze immediately started to swirl without warning. Like an invisible garment, it curled around Claire, Linley, and Alice. Soon after, under the lead of Alice, who was controlling elven magic, the group of 4 floated into the air and flew towards the elf forest. After passing through the Alicia Elven Academy's buildings and walls, as well as the endless forest of tall trees, Noah's group of 4 flew straight towards the center of the sea of flames that was constantly spreading out due to the intense flames. Because they didn't fly very high, when Noah's group flew into the range of the sea of fire, the high temperature of the flames immediately roasted them, illuminating their faces red. After an unknown amount of time, they finally arrived at the location of the initial explosion thanks to Alice's elven magic. There, the trees had already been blown away by the shocking explosion, leaving behind a charred area. Noah, who was being pulled by Alice and floating in the air, looked down and gradually focused his gaze. Noah's outstanding senses allowed him to sense it. In the center of the sea of flames, there was an unusually violent aura. That aura was actually somewhat familiar. It can't be, just as a guess appeared in Noah's mind, Claire, Lindsay, and Alice saw the scene in the thick sea of flames below. To be more precise, they saw a black shadow. A huge black shadow that was at least 10 to 20 meters tall. That's Claire, whose eyes were burning with flames, was the first to clearly see the full appearance of the huge black shadow in the sea of flames. An expression of disbelief appeared on her pretty face. It's a lie, right? After Claire, Lindsay, and Alice also clearly saw the full appearance of the black shadow in the middle of the sea of flames. It was covered in a thick and heavy composite mech. On every part of the mech, there were black cannons mounted on it, pointing in all directions. It was a fortress that looked like a mechanical giant. That's Lindsay's expression changed. Silent fortress? Sister? Alice cried out involuntarily. How? How could it be? Not only Claire, Lindsay, and Alice, but even Noah didn't dare to believe that it was Versilia's elven device that he had destroyed in 2 or 3 moves yesterday. As for why, the reason was very simple. Although Versilia's elven device was as big as a giant, it was at most 4 to 5 meters tall, definitely not 10 to 20 meters tall. Moreover, Versilia's elven device was that kind of deep red. But this mech fortress in front of them was not only completely black, but there were also sharp spikes everywhere, forming an extremely terrifying and strange shape. It looked like a giant undead spirit. What's going on? Alice cried out in shock. What's going on? Noah's expression also changed, but a cold voice sounded directly from his heart, dispelling Noah's doubts. Master, that's a spell engraving. Aster? Noah was startled at first, then said in surprise. Did you say spell engraving? Yes, that's the appearance of an elven envoy that had its spirit devoured by the spell engraving and lost its mind. Aster's voice sounded in Noah's heart. Moreover, looking at how violent that divine power is, I'm afraid that many spell engraving has been transplanted. It's very dangerous. Just as Aster's voice sounded in Noah's heart, below, in the center of the scorching sea of fire, the black mech giant suddenly raised its head and looked in the direction of Noah's group. In that instant, Claire, Lindsay, and Alice all felt a chill in their hearts. Although Noah did not feel the slightest chill, a warning sign sounded in his heart, causing him to cry out loudly without any hesitation. Careful. Chapter 10-11. Be careful. Almost as soon as Noah's voice fell, the pitch-black mecha giant in the center of the sea of fire below seemed to have discovered Noah's group floating in the sky. A scarlet light suddenly flashed from its eyes. Gotcha! With such a mechanical sound, a huge steel cannon suddenly rose from the mecha giant's shoulder and aimed at Noah's group in the sky. An extremely astonishing divine power gathered at the muzzle. Bang! The next moment, the loud sound of cannon fire reverberated. Constructed from scorching flames, the huge cannon fire with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters was like lightning. It rubbed against the air, causing the whistling winds to tremble and distort crazily. It shot directly at Noah's group in the sky. Finally, like a huge meteorite, the fierce cannon fire crashed down on Noah's group. Boom! Suddenly, a loud rumble resounded in the sky above the sea of fire like a landslide, stirring up a wave of fire. It was like an explosion of fireworks, shaking in all directions. Looking from the direction of the Elven Academy, one could see a dense flame suddenly exploding above the sea of fire. The loud rumble caused even the students in the academy to turn pale. Their ears rang, and they felt dizzy. Without a doubt, if they were hit by such a blow, even the flame elves with extremely high immunity to cannon fire would be annihilated in an instant, without leaving a trace. And if even the elves were like this, there was no need to talk about humans. However, the pitch-black elven magic device that looked like a giant mecha seemed to have sensed something. It turned its head that was originally looking towards the sky and looked towards one of the corners of the sea of fire around it. There, Noah, Claire, Linley, and Alice just happened to descend from the sky and land on the ground that was scorching hot from the flames. Obviously, under Noah's reminder, Alice reacted at the critical moment. She controlled the flying elven magic and brought Noah's group to successfully avoid that terrifying blow. Looking at the dense flames in the sky caused by the cannon fire just now, Noah frowned slightly. The power of that attack just now couldn't be compared to the power of the artillery bombardment that Versilia displayed against Noah yesterday. The two couldn't be compared at all. If Versilia's cannon fire yesterday could only be considered as the power of an ordinary cannon, then the cannon fire just now was truly at the level of a powerful missile. It was just as Aster had said. Versilia's body might have been transplanted with more spell engravings. Versilia. Claire still couldn't believe that Versilia would launch such a fatal attack on them. She looked at the pitch-black mecha giant in shock. Are you really crazy? That fortress woman. Linley's pretty face was more or less unsightly. She really did it, sister. Alice couldn't help but take a step forward and yell with a sorrowful expression. What are you doing? Could it be that you really transplanted the spell engravings? It wasn't Versilia's voice that answered Alice. Instead, it was a heavy cannon that was set up in Alice's direction. Bang! The loud sound of the cannon fire wasn't inferior to the previous cannon fire at all. The huge cannon fire that was much larger than a human cut through the air, digging through the soil and sending waves of fire flying. It shot directly in Alice's direction. Alice. Claire and Linley both cried out in surprise. Noah's legs tightened, and his body tensed up. He was prepared to charge in Alice's direction. At this moment, a majestic voice turned into ripples in the air and gradually spread into everyone's ears. Sword Saint who serves the King of Suns, my knight, fulfill the blood contract here and become a guardian sword. Come to my side. A powerful divine aura suddenly condensed in front of Alice, bringing with it a wave of light particles. Amidst the vibrations in the air, it turned into a tall figure. It was a tall figure covered in pure white armor, holding a knight's sword and shield. He was like a knight, and his entire body rippled with a holy aura. Bang! The huge cannon fire landed on the tall knight's heavy shield and exploded. The scorching waves of fire and dense sand were split into two with the knight holding the heavy shield as the center. It didn't affect Alice behind him. This is... Noah was startled at first, but then his heart stirred and he looked in a direction. There was a person there. A young girl with waist-length purple hair that swayed in the air reached her hand towards Alice. Waves of divine power surged around her. Seeing this young girl, Claire, Linley, and Alice all cried out in surprise. Fianna? It was Fianna, who was taken away by Lotus. Under everyone's gaze, Fianna smiled sweetly. This is the holy elemental night elf passed down from generation to generation in the Audisia royal family Geochius. Fianna's delicate face, which was slightly coquettish, was filled with confidence and pride that had never been seen before. He's also my contracted elf. Hearing Fianna's words, everyone looked at the tall elemental night elf. The holy elemental elves, also known as holy elves, were very unique among the elves. One of the reasons why the holy elves were unique was because the holy elemental element was the leader of the 5 elemental elements. The holy elven king of the 5 elven kings was also the elven king who had the deepest influence on the human world and the elemental elven world. Another reason was that elves with holy attributes had always been different from other elves. They were very proud and would choose suitable elves to be their masters based on their own preferences. Even if the other party was witch G, the holy elves would only be willing to open their hearts to a group of especially pure young girls and form a contract with them. Hence, apart from magical fairies who basically couldn't form a contract with humans, there were very few human elven envoys who could possess holy fairies. However, it was not strange that Fianna could have a contract spirit with a holy attribute. No matter what, Fianna was the princess of the Audisia Empire, and she was once a candidate for the elf concubine. If even Witch G couldn't form a contract with a holy elf, then none of the human elven envoys could. Of course, it was precisely because the holy elves were so special that even the slightest accident could lead to problems. Lotus had also said that something had happened to Fianna's contract spirit. Now, it seemed that with Lotus' help, Fianna's contract spirit's problem had been solved. Otherwise, Fianna wouldn't have such confidence and pride on her face. Suddenly, the pitch-black mecha giant shuddered. With a violent movement it hadn't made before, it abruptly turned around and faced behind it. So, you've really been forced to this extent by me? As this voice sounded, a young girl holding a pitch-black knight's sword and wearing a witch's robe slowly walked out of the sea of flames. Her eyes didn't carry any emotion, but the determination and sharpness in her eyes were directed directly at the pitch-black mecha giant. If you're in this state because of me, then let me put an end to it, Versilia Eva Farangelto. As soon as his voice fell, a rich divine power rose from Lotus's body. Like a blue mist that was evaporating, it turned into a wave of air that violently undulated. Feeling the divine aura from Lotus, the memories sleeping in the pitch-black mecha giant's body seemed to have been awakened. Lotus. Show. Bell. Air. In the next instant, Versilia's sleep-talking voice came out of the pitch-black mecha giant's body as if it was squeezed out. Then, an extremely ominous black aura suddenly shook from the pitch-black mecha giant's body. Woo 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 woo. Versilia's roar finally resounded above the sea of flames. Her voice was like that of a wild beast that had completely lost its mind. Chapter 10-12. In a corner of the elf forest that was engulfed in a sea of fire, waves of fire surged. The high temperature of the fire shook violently, causing the trees to gradually collapse and turn into charcoal. Woo 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 woo. A gigantic black giant with a height of 10 to 20 meters stood in the middle of the sea of fire. Versilia's irrational roar sounded from the black giant, making it seem as if the black giant had gone mad. Ominous black gas fluctuated from its body and spread in all directions. Lien. A subtle, vaguely, he could hear Versilia's roar from within the giant's body. Her voice was filled with an obsession that was deeper than madness. Hearing the voice clearly, Lotus gripped the pitch-black elven device tightly as she stared straight at the giant that seemed to cover the entire sky. The dense divine aura that was fluctuating around her was instantly channeled into the knight's sword in her hand, causing it to emit a dazzling black light. Boom! At the same time, ominous black gas surged out of the black mecha giant's body, turning into tentacle-like whips that cut through the air and swept towards Lotus. However, at the same time, Lotus also swung out the elven device in her hand to meet the oncoming whip. Clang! The incorporeal pitch-black fog collided with the fairy device in Lotus's hand, causing a metallic clanging sound and sparks to erupt. A rather strange force vibrated, causing the whip shadow formed by the pitch-black fog to stagger involuntarily. It brushed past Lien's body and was thrown to the side. Bang! The mist whip didn't slow down in the slightest as it landed on a nearby tree. It directly blew up the burning tree into a pile of wood dregs. Woo 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 woo. This result caused the black mecha giant to roar in anger. The black gas that continuously surged out of its body suddenly flowed, quickly moving along its body and scuttling to one of its giant arms. In the next moment, the giant arm that was covered with spikes and black gas brought along a whistling gust of wind. With a swoosh, it directly swung towards Lotus's direction. In terms of power, this blow was indeed unrivaled. Even Noah, who had the blessing of LV for level ability value, did not want to fight head-on. However, in terms of technique, this attack was too crude. It was impossible to hit a sword dance expert like Lotus. Without any hesitation, Lotus's feet moved and she slightly dodged. The black arm suddenly whistled past Lotus's body and fell into the air. At this moment, Lotus's expression. This was because an ominous black gas suddenly surged from the huge arm that had brushed past Lotus's body and landed in the air. It actually attached itself to Lotus's body and forcefully seized the divine power energy that was fluctuating around Lotus like a phosphorescent wave of energy. This black gas. Lotus eyebrows. It can actually absorb divine aura? You can't fight it head-on, Lotus. Lastia's voice sounded in Lotus's mind. Incantations have always had the effect of changing the elves and elven users' elemental attributes. Right now, the elemental attributes of Versilia Eva Farangelto's divine might have been changed. If you directly touch her, even you will have your divine might stolen. That means... Lotus stared at the ominous black gas that fluctuated around the black mecha giant. The main body of the black gas is Versilia's divine aura that has been changed by the incantation engraving? That's right. Lasti softly said. So, it's best not to get close to Versilia. While speaking, the black mecha giant had already retracted its arm. Once again, it swung its arm. Like huge rocks falling from the sky, it violently smashed towards Lotus's direction. This time, Lotus did not rely on her superior technique to perform a small shift. Instead, she nimbly flew out, the tips of her feet touching the ground. Like a ghost, she nimbly dodged the ferocious attacks that fell from the sky. Bang 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 bang. In the center of the elven forest, which was covered in a sea of fire, the sound of violent punches hitting the ground rang out continuously. Every punch caused the ground to tremble violently, sand to tumble, waves of fire to rise and fall, and the atmosphere to distort. The scene was extremely shocking. Sister. Alice's head heated up. Just as she was about to rush out, Noah suddenly grabbed her shoulder. Calm down, Alice. Noah shook his head at Alice. Versilia's obsession with Lotus, you should know best. Just leave it to Lotus. We can't interfere. Alice bit her lips, looking indignant. That was Alice's unwillingness to accept that she was completely unable to help her elder sister. At the same time, she was unwilling to accept that she couldn't stop Versilia from going astray and transplanting the incantation engraving. The one who could empathize with Alice's unwillingness the most was Claire. Because, just like Alice now, Claire could only watch as her sister betrayed the Elven King and became the Elven concubine of Calamity, bringing unimaginable disaster to the entire Osea Empire. At that time, if Claire had the ability to stop Rubia, the Elstein family wouldn't have declined overnight, and even Claire's parents wouldn't have been imprisoned. Claire pressed down on Alice's shoulder just like Noah did, gazing at Alice as she spoke word by word. Now, we can only believe in Lotus Asubble. Although agreeing with Claire's words makes me unhappy, I still agree. Linley closed her eyes and didn't lose her elegance. That's not something we can interfere with. Believe in Lotus Asubble. Faena smiled. She's the strongest sword dancer, the object of our dreams. She won't disappoint us. That's right. Noah withdrew his hand from Alice's body, and slowly turned around. He cast his gaze towards a corner of the sea of fire as he said these words. Moreover, we also have things we need to do. Hearing Noah's words, the group of girls subconsciously followed Noah's gaze and looked in the direction Noah was looking. In the next instant, all the girls' expressions changed. Ah! Have I been discovered? Following this somewhat coquettish voice, a tall and graceful figure emerged from the sea of fire. You can still discover me in such a situation. As expected of the only male elven user who can compete with the strongest sword dancer. After speaking, the tall and graceful figure walked out of the sea of fire, revealing her full appearance. Then, the pair of pointy ears attracted everyone's attention. Elfie clan? Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice glanced at each other. Noah looked straight at the tall woman from the Elfie clan and suddenly spoke. You're the merchant from the Skeleton Alliance who snuck into the Elven Academy, came in contact with Versilia, and helped Versilia transplant the spell engravings, right? The merchant from the Skeleton Alliance? Claire, Linley, and Fayanna instantly became vigilant. Alice's face was filled with anger. A gust of wind swept up in her hand and turned into a ceremonial spear, pointing it at Vivian. You're the one who deceived Sister Versilia. How can you say that I deceived her? Versilia willingly accepted my spell engravings. Vivian smiled and turned her gaze to Versilia's direction. Looking at the berserk pitch-black mecha giant, her gaze became scorching hot. However, I also didn't expect that after transplanting so many spell engravings, Versilia actually survived. Although her rationality was swallowed and she fell into a berserk state, to be able to withstand so many spell engravings without dying, this opportunity is really too rare. That child can definitely make a big step forward in my research. After saying this, Vivian looked at Noah's group and suddenly smiled. So, I can't let you touch my experimental subject. After speaking, a red jade-shaped gem appeared in Vivian's hand. That's... Noah immediately recognized that gem. That red jade-shaped gem was the Elven King's blood that Geo-Inzak possessed. Chapter 10:13. That's, not only Noah, but even Viviana and Alice, who had seen Geo display the blood of the Elven King, recognized the origin of the red gemstone in Vivian's hand. Although Claire and Linsley didn't know that it was all of Geo-Inzak's Elven King's blood, they recognized the Elven King's blood itself. They were both astonished at the sight. Noah narrowed his eyes and looked at Vivian with a cold gaze. Why do you have the blood of the Elven King? This is what Versilia used to pay for a large number of spell engravings. Vivian held the blood of the Elven King tightly, the coquettish smile on her face growing wider and wider. I heard that the power of the Elven King, who can control large numbers of elves, is sealed inside. I used it a little when Versilia lost control and found some good opponents for you. The blood of the Elven King in Vivian's hands started to blossom with a black mist-like light, shrouding Vivian's body. At this moment, in the sea of fire behind Vivian, little bits of light suddenly started to emerge. No, it wasn't light, but eyes. Pairs of eyes seemed to be hiding in the trees at night, intending to hunt, staring at the eyes of wolves like prey. Of course, the eyes were not ordinary wolves. Instead, they were wolf spirits of the fire attribute that were surrounded by flames. It was as if they were made of fire itself. There were more than 1,000 of these wolf spirits, and the reason in their eyes had long since disappeared. All that was left was a dull, lifeless gaze that was being manipulated like marionettes. Under Vivian's special control, their ferocity was aroused. Scarlet. Fenrir. Claire and Linsley both summoned their contracted spirits and turned them into the most suitable elven equipment, holding them tightly in their hands. Claire whipped the flame whip in her hand against the ground. With a "paw" sound, the flames on the whip became extremely ferocious. If we fight here, my Scarlet won't lose to any elf. Watch me burn you to ashes. Claire's contracted spirit was a fire cat spirit of the fire attribute. Of course, Scarlet's power would be greatly increased when surrounded by a sea of fire. On the other hand, Linsrei, who had turned Ice Fairy Fenrir into a crystal-like longbow, was secretly speechless. This is truly the worst battle environment. In the Sea of Fire, Lindsley's ice elves would be weakened and their strength would decrease by a lot. Only Fianna's holy attribute Night Elf Geokias and Alice's wind attribute Magic Wind Elf Smough were not affected by the high temperature and could unleash their full power. However, Fianna was born in the Gods' Parliament, so she didn't know how to use the battle sword dance, let alone use the elven device. It was impossible for Fianna to play a big role in the battle. Fianna's strength was the ritual god's music and the strong defense of the holy elven knight. However, in such a sea of fire, Fianna couldn't perform the ritual dance with peace of mind. Alice, on the other hand, was a bit impulsive. After knowing what Vivian had done to Vercelia, her face was full of anger and she would most likely attack recklessly. If something went wrong and she was injured, she would definitely be drowned by the flame wolf elves in an instant and die without a doubt. In other words, apart from Claire, the other three girls were all at a disadvantage. Vivian, who clearly knew this, had a scheming smile on her face. Unfortunately, Vivian forgot about one person. One person who could change the entire battle situation. Noah, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. "This isn't a friendly duel, but a pure slaughter, right?" Noah's words stunned everyone, including Vivian. "Sorry." Noah lifted his feet and slowly walked towards Vivian, a sharp glint flashing through his deep eyes. "For me, numbers don't have much meaning." When this sentence came out from Noah's mouth, the space behind Noah that was dyed red by the sea of fire suddenly distorted. Wang! Amidst the tremors, golden ripples that resembled water ripples suddenly undulated from Noah's back. "What's that?" Vivian had an ominous premonition in her heart, causing her to speak without hesitation. "Let's go." Flame Wolf Elves. The Flame Wolf Elves' army that appeared from the sea of fire shot out bloody light from their eyes. Roar, 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 roar. In the next second, the overwhelming pack of flame wolves roared wantonly and charged in Noah's direction, bringing with them an extremely high temperature as they surged over like a tide. Looking at the overwhelming Flame Wolf Elves' army, Noah just slowly raised one hand. The golden ripples that covered Noah's back suddenly burst out bursts of energy waves that were hard to detect. After that, numerous sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and various other weapons with gorgeous and extravagant designs abruptly shot out from the numerous golden ripples, and they faced the army of flame wolf fairies that were surging forward like fish. With a shake, they shot up explosively. Like a stream of light, the rain of precious artifacts that covered the sky and the earth met with the army of flame wolves that covered the sky and the earth. Bang! The flame wolf spirit that was charging at the very front was directly shot by a spear. Its entire body exploded into a cluster of sparks in an instant. It didn't even have the time to let out a scream before it disappeared into the air. Bang, 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 bang. After the first flame wolf elves that were shot, a series of muffled sounds rang out one after another, following closely behind. Every time a sound rang out, one of the flame wolf elves that were charging at them violently would be shot by Noah's relics, exploding into sparks all over the sky. And every time a round of relics was shot out, a new one would pop out from the golden ripples behind Noah. In the vibrations of the air, they all shot out rapidly. Not long after, the group of flame wolf elves that numbered over 1,000 were almost all blasted apart by the treasures that shot over like streams of light. They scattered into sparks that filled the sky and merged into the surrounding sea of fire, disappearing without a trace. In the end, there were less than 100 flame wolf elves that were scattered around Vivian to protect her. The flames that surrounded them illuminated Vivian's shocked face. "What? What's that?" Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice were all shocked. Not to mention Viviana and Alice, even Claire and Lindsley, who had been teammates with Noah for nearly half a month, didn't know that Noah had such a trick up his sleeve. The only thing that could be confirmed was that those luxurious-looking weapons were definitely not elven devices. However, in terms of power, each of those weapons was not inferior to the elven devices used by elven users. Lotus, who was fighting with the pitch-black mecha giant that Versilia had transformed into, also noticed the commotion over here. She glanced sideways at Noah, whose back was covered with golden ripples, with a somewhat dignified expression in her eyes. That person actually hid such a trick. Ignoring everyone's shock, Noah looked at Vivian and raised his hand again. A sword immediately popped out from a golden ripple beside him. As Noah waved his hand, it turned into a stream of light, piercing through the air like lightning, and swept toward Vivian's direction. Bang! A muffled sound sounded again. It was the sound of Noah's noble phantasm exploding a flame wolf spirit that had appeared in front of Vivian and blocked a fatal blow for her. Vivian had already reacted. She knew that now was not the time to be shocked. She held the blood of the Elf King tightly and dissipated like a cloud of mist. When she reappeared, she was already beside Versilia's pitch-black mecha giant. Sure enough, it's a bit difficult to rely on the blood of the Elf King to deal with an elven user who is comparable to the most powerful sword dancer. Vivian forced a smile. But, I still have the most powerful weapon here. The blood of the Elf King in Vivian's hands suddenly emitted black smoke, which lingered around the pitch-black mecha giant. Ah! In the pitch-black mecha giant, Versilia's painful roars gradually sounded. At this moment, the violent and ferocious aura on the pitch-black mecha giant became even more intense. The next moment, the violent impact waves and the strong fire waves exploded in front of the huge shield at the same time, stirring up turbulence all over the sky. It swept in all directions and shook the ground until it cracked inch by inch. Noah and the others, who were protected behind the huge shield, were not affected at all. Taking a closer look, the huge shield was like a city wall, with golden flower petals embedded in the middle of the shield as an ornament. If Gilgamesh was here, he would definitely recognize the origin of this shield. Blazing sevenfold rings, Law Ajax. To be more precise, it should be said that it was the prototype of Blazing Sevenfold Rings, Law Ajax. Gilgamesh had used this relic before, and he called it the Shield of God. It was undoubtedly the highest level of relic that had an invincible defense against throwing weapons. Facing the impenetrable huge shield, Versilia was like a mad beast. She let out a mournful roar, while constantly firing her cannons. The cannons continued to bombard the huge shield, causing the sky-shaking explosions and shockwaves of flames. Alice felt as though her heart was being sliced by a knife when she heard Versilia's shrill cries. She endured the pain, grabbed Noah's hand, and begged, "Don't worry, Noah, don't worry. Don't worry. Noah, I beg you, please save Sister Versilia." Alice's pleading stunned Noah. Alice was a very serious and stubborn girl. As the head of Wind King Knights, it was really not easy for this young girl to plead others for help. She was aiming to become an excellent knight. Noah could only look at Alice's pleading face and closed his eyes. Then, he took out the elven device that had transformed into a dagger from his back. "Aster, it's time." The dagger in Noah's hand emitted a dazzling light and turned into a shiny silver holy sword. "Sorry, I know you want to end the feud between you and Versilia." Noah held the holy sword tightly in his hand and looked up at Lotus. "However, there are two of them now. If we attack together, it won't be considered breaking the rules, right?" Lotus looked straight at Noah and saw Noah's unquestionable expression. After a long while, she sighed and nodded. "I understand." The two of them looked at each other and stepped forward at the same time. Behind the huge shield, two figures turned into two streams of light and flashed out from the left and right sides of the shield at the same time. They drew a perfect arc and flew toward the black mecha giant in front of them. "Is he here?" Vivian couldn't help but take a step back as she shouted in a delicate voice. "Go!" A black fog gushed out from the black mecha giant beside Vivian and gradually condensed into a whip shadow. It swung in the air and shot out, leaving a mark on the hard ground. It violently whipped toward Noah and Lotus. In the face of the oncoming whip shadow, Noah and Lotus trembled at the same time. Their speed suddenly soared like lightning. Before the whip shadow could fall, they had already arrived in front of the pitch-black mecha giant. Absolute sword skill. Primary form purple lightning. Two cold sword lights, one white and one black, appeared at the same time and heavily fell on the black mecha giant. Poochie. Two chilling sword lights slashed across the body of the black mecha giant, piercing through its shoulders. With a loud tearing sound, the two gigantic arms of the black mecha giant were directly severed, falling to the ground with a loud crash. Ah! Versilia's roar became even crazier. This was caused by Vivian, who had watched the black mecha giant's arm being chopped off, forcibly controlling the black mecha giant to attack while her expression changed. Thus, two heavy cannons were set up on the shoulders of the black mecha giant. Shocking divine might energy was converted into a terrifying cannon blast that shot towards Noah and Lotus. However, when they saw the two cannons shooting toward them, Noah and Lotus actually advanced instead of retreating. With great tacit understanding, they rushed forward. The holy sword and demon sword in their hands surged with dense divine might as they swung their swords at the incoming cannons. Bang! The sharp weapons collided with the fierce cannons, setting off a violent wave of fire. However, Vivian was suddenly shocked. The violent wave of fire suddenly rotated and turned into two flaming vortexes. One of the vortexes was absorbed by the two highest-level elven devices, one white and one black. Holding the elven devices that carried the two scorching flames, Noah and Lotus rushed out of the fire wave. In a flash, they suddenly appeared in front of the black mecha giant. Absolute sword skill. Form 4 flame cut. The holy sword and demon sword that carried the violent flaming vortexes blasted out like a violent wind wheel, fiercely bombarding the black mecha giant. Dong! A terrifying loud sound resounded through the sky. Chapter 10-15. Dong! The holy sword and the demonic sword slammed into the mecha giant, creating a deafening boom. At the same time, the fire vortex exploded, turning into a terrifyingly high temperature that instantly enveloped Versilia's elven magic equipment. Ah! Within the raging flames, Versilia let out a painful wail. The ominous black gas around the elven device evaporated under the heat of the flames, turning into smoke and disappearing into thin air. However, the buff from the large number of spell engravings made Versilia's power endless. Even if she was burned in the violent flames, she still persisted bitterly and didn't fall. Seeing this, Noah and Lotus, who were holding the demon slayer and Vorpal's sword, nimbly retreated with the help of the blast wind. After landing firmly on the ground, they looked at each other. Looks like I have no choice but to go all out. Lotus's eyes flashed. She stared at Versilia, who was struggling to hold on in the raging flames, and suddenly spoke. Since you also know the absolute sword skill, you should be able to use that move, right? That move? Noah was startled at first, then he seemed to understand what Lotus was talking about. His eyebrows twitched. Noah and Lotus used a variety of absolute sword skills. Sword skill for body destruction, initial form, purple lightning. Group annihilation sword technique, form 3, shadow moon dance. Destructive sword technique, form 6, shattered tooth. There was also a sword technique that countered certain attributes, using a unique frequency of divine might energy to absorb the opponent's flames, neutralizing the opponent's attack while at the same time using the power of the flames to superimpose on one's own divine might energy to perform an even more powerful attack. Form 4, Flame Slash. These sword skills were able to display unimaginable effects and effects under specific battle situations. The move that Lotus mentioned was not only the most powerful of the absolute sword skills, but it was also not used against elven users. It was a destructive sword skill used to defeat large elves. According to Gray and Vaz, this move was originally a dual sword skill, but if the user's skill was high enough, they could use it even with a single weapon. And once this sword technique was practiced to the extreme, then even among all the elves, apart from the Elf King, the highest level demon god level elves could be killed. Although it's an ultimate sword skill used to deal with large elves, but if it's you and I, even if the opponent is an elven user, we can still use it, right? Lotus stared closely at the pitch-black mecha giant and said. Moreover, even if it's not a large elven device, Versilia's size is enough to be used against absolute sword skill. Hearing this, Noah tightened his grip on the holy sword in his hand and stared at the black mecha giant in the flames. Think carefully. This isn't the elemental elf realm. It transformed into a substance-like ripple that spread out within a couple of blinks of an eye. Only after it spread to a distance of dozens of meters away did it gradually disappear. As for the trembling of the ground, it couldn't be stopped no matter what. It was also because of this that Claire, Linley, Viviana, Alice, and even Vivian, who were caught off guard by the trembling of the ground, didn't notice it. On the two sides of the black mecha giant that was bombarding the ground, two figures suddenly flashed out. Clang! Dazzling white light and rich black light burst out from the demon slayer and the Vorpal sword at the same time, instantly illuminating the entire space that was dyed red by the sea of fire. At the same time, an astonishing divine power spread out from Noah and Lotus like phosphorescence, surging in all directions like a tide. The two figures holding the demon slayer and the Vorpal sword seemed to flash across the space with the black mecha giant as the center. Suddenly, they crossed each other. Absolute sword skill. Form breaker ardent flower spiral sword dance 18 consecutive slashes. The holy sword and demon sword emitting white light and black light instantly turned into countless sword rays that crisscrossed on the black mecha giant. Poochie 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 poochie. Along with the chaotic slashing sounds, the huge body of the black mecha giant was cut apart by the sword rays. Along the sword rays, each part of the mecha giant slid down one by one, spewing out pitch-black mist, and collapsed in one breath. Boom! A muffled explosion resounded. The black mecha fortress that was like a giant that blotted out the sky suddenly exploded, turned into specks of starlight, and disappeared in the air. Among them, Versilia, whose whole body was covered with ferocious brands, closed her eyes tightly and fell to the ground due to gravity. She made a muffled sound, and her delicate body kept convulsing. On the two sides of the starlight that filled the sky, Noah and Lotus had their backs facing each other. Their backs were straight, and their robes were fluttering in the wind. It was a very beautiful scene. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.